This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
3 minutes after 10 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. John Bolton writing in the Daily Telegraph today. Bolton, of course, former national security advisor to Donald Trump from 2018 to 2019. He never keeps anyone close for very long, does he? That's an interesting observation. Well, so says he, who just made it. He never keeps anybody close for very long. It's not surprising when you think about it, because you get the sense he'd betray his own grandmother for a packet of Maltesers, but he never keeps anybody close for very long. And John Bolton didn't suffer the fate of Mike Pence, the actual vice president, who almost had a sort of death sentence put on his head by Donald Trump during that January the 6th coup attempt. But the fact that nobody stays, even his sort of lawyers ended up turning on him and in jail. It's incredible. Anyway, sorry, I've done it again. You lift up one rock and there's 100 rocks there begging you to lift them up. But John Bolton's written a piece today about the key to understanding him. And in many ways, the key to understanding him involves grasping his enormously oversimplified view of the world. He believes that if he gets on well with someone, then the two countries are getting on well with each other, regardless of whether or not that someone routinely murders dissidents, orders the murder of dissidents, or steals epic fortunes from their own population. If they make the right noises in his company, as Putin and obviously Kim Jong-un have done, then he walks away, according to John Bolton, his former national security advisor, convinced that relations between the two countries, not just the two men, but the two countries, are both harmonious and positive. I think, and I'm always a little bit wary of using the word stupid. I know what you're thinking, but you use it all the time. And you're right, I do. But I'm always a little bit wary of using it, even though I use it all the time. And goodness knows, there aren't many words that fit the most of the highly paid commentators, pundits, presenters and columnists in this country better than stupid. Do I need to do the quick litany out of the things they've told you that would go one way, which everybody honest told you would go the other, whether it's Brexit or Liz Truss's fiscal policy, austerity, Boris Johnson's premiership, or of course Donald Trump's second presidency. Do you remember the line? Oh, don't worry about what he says, worry about what he does. John Bolton rightly targets that today, pointing out that he told you exactly what he would do with regard to so-called tariffs. He described it as the most beautiful word in the dictionary. It may now have been usurped by groceries, which he's developed a peculiar fascination with in recent days. He seems to think that the word groceries is some sort of mysterious code that he hadn't actually come across before. But the experts got it wrong. Businesses got it wrong. Bankers got it wrong. People that backed him got it wrong. The coalition of crackpots is beginning to fall apart. Some of the extremely rich people who thought he'd be brilliant for business have already turned on him. Even Elon Musk has posted, I think, is it Milton Friedman, the economist for whom tariffs are one of the dirtiest words in the British dictionary. So if Donald Trump considers it to be the English dictionary, I beg your pardon, if Donald Trump considers it to be the best word in the dictionary, the most beautiful word in the dictionary, why is Elon Musk drawing your attention to somebody who considers it to be an absolute disaster zone? I'll leave you to work that out for yourself. But it is there, that notion that the people who suggested you shouldn't pay any attention at all to what he says, but should focus instead on what he does, have once again been proved to be the stupidest people on the planet. So you'd look at Ukraine and you'd look at NATO as well. But, of course, as John Bolton points out today, what his tariffs will do to America's economy and the entire economic system leave Ukraine and NATO in the shade. This is his former national security advisor writing, if Trump had acted on April the 1st instead of the 2nd, he could quickly have said it was all an April Fool's Day joke, thereby saving the global economy trillions of dollars. I don't think anyone listening to this program needs it pointing out, but if you're saying something like, oh, Why aren't you talking about domestic matters? I hope I don't need to explain to you what the word global means or what the impact of these policies is already having on this country, this government, this side of the world, this planet, this population. But come on, give your head a wobble. Thereby saving the global economy, writes John Bolton, trillions of dollars of damage when markets started heading south. Here's the point, though. Unfortunately, Trump is totally serious, a fact evident long before Liberation Day. It's sort of petty, simplistic, and vindictive. That's how you understand him. Petty, vindictive, and simplistic. That's not necessarily John Bolton's conclusion, but it is where I have been led. And I'm talking only here about John Bolton in the context of his knowledge of his former boss. Okay, his knowledge of Donald Trump. He is not what you would describe as a warm character or a sympathetic character in almost any other context. But he's been there. He has been, to quote Hamilton, in the room where it happens. And therefore, he's got more of an insight into some of these matters than most others. The concessions to Russia, if you like, the betrayal of NATO. It's all there. It all fits this petty and vindictive. Petty, I'm going to write this down actually because I always forget these little phrases when they occur to me. Petty, simplistic and vindictive. And then you've got the problem, of course, of trying to bring, I've said this to you so many times recently, trying to bring the only tools you've got to a task that has little use for your tools. And that's why I think everything is upside down. Everybody is upside down. Chris in Brum lost $5,000 off his pension in a single day. He's just been in touch and suggests that anyone moaning about you talking about this needs to give their head away. Nobody is, Chris. Sometimes I like to get in ahead of possible criticism, and that's why I mentioned that nobody listening to this show is likely to be so daft. But there it is, $5,000 in a single day. The estimate of how much longer you might have to work for if your pension takes a permanent hit from this is in years, not months or days. It's in years. If you're relying on a certain level of income in order to be able to be retired, then it's going up in years. And of course, all of these are measurable reactions. You can watch a stock market go off a cliff. You can watch a little rally in the morning. Things are so chaotic. I don't know if you saw this yesterday. A kind of online rumour spread that Donald Trump was minded to suspend some of the tariffs, or that he might press pause, or even engage the reverse gear. And the markets rallied remarkably. There was this brief and temporary spike because of an online rumour. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and equally I'm not knowledgeable enough to know how likely it is that might have been engineered by people minded to make a fortune. I don't think you can underestimate how much of what happens in this world is driven by people minded to make a fortune out of fluctuations and events. One British politician was pointing with a maniacal grin on his face at a picture of the pound plummeting in the aftermath of the Brexit vote. No prizes for guessing who that was. And that's the point, isn't it? Is the instability and the confusion is such that nobody knows where to hang their hat. You don't even have, as far as I can tell, the people who predicted the global financial crisis, the sort of lonely voices who were subsequently vindicated. There's an Irish economist, who's a pal of mine called David McWilliam, who was brilliant on this. I mean, it was a reputation-defining moment for a tiny, tiny number of people who saw it on the horizon. In retrospect, it's crystal clear. Everyone can see it. But in the moment, at the time or in advance, nobody can. Otherwise, we would all have changed our behaviours. So you can't really do that either. You can't use that traditional mode of analysis. Gosh, this might actually be a topic. David's in London. He says, tell Chris in Brum he's a lucky so-and-so. I lost the equivalent of 3 years' salary yesterday. I'll be dead now before I can retire. Let's open up that road as well. If not now, then later in the programme. And that question, in fact, there's two, isn't there, here now? It's pretty clearly a double-sided story this morning. There's the political and then there's the personal. And I think we will do both. So you have The political, where, as I've said to you many times, it is almost impossible to make meaningful moments, to make meaningful contributions to the conversation, because I think it is, well, that's what I'm going to ask you in a minute. I think it is that simple, petty, simplistic, vindictive. But on the personal, this is the stuff that we can measure. This is the stuff that we do know about. Millions of people losing money. Some people possibly overnight going from comfortable to uncomfortable. I don't know enough about this world to know how permanent or temporary that might be, but I do know this. Donald Trump seems to be motivated by nothing complicated, by nothing sophisticated. The only parallel I've been able to think of in recent days was with the early days of the coronavirus, when Boris Johnson was in charge. You remember him? He was writing about adolescence at the weekend, about 3 weeks after everybody else, with nothing to say about the man that he told you would be fantastic for both the United States of America and for the United Kingdom, Donald Trump. But you remember Boris Johnson. He was Prime Minister of this country, would you believe? I know. It's extraordinary. Imagine waking up from a coma that you went into 6 years ago, finding out that Boris Johnson and Liz Truss had both been Prime Ministers of the United Kingdom. But he was, and he was in charge at the beginning of the coronavirus. And we were watching footage in Italy, particularly, that was almost unbelievable, apocalyptic in its impact and its reality. You know, people almost piling high, bodies, and hospitals utterly unable to cope. And we were watching that, which was in Italy, not in some distant clime. It was in Italy, a country we know well, previously fellow member of the European Union, holiday destination, lots of people with family there. It was in Italy. It was on our doorstep, metaphorically speaking. And we sat here thinking, well, I bet they're really working hard. I bet they're coming up with a plan. I bet they've got... And then they started doing things. And we started thinking, that looks like they're making it up as they go along. Then they started contradicting each other, which is a little bit more forgivable than we realised at the time, because the science changed. I think at one point even Anthony Fauci was unconvinced about the efficacy of masks, for example, and then you learn more about the virus and you realise masks are a good idea. But you remember what it was like. And we sat here together most mornings. For a lot of that time, of course, I was in my shed, which was a deeply strange experience. We sat here together most mornings and we really struggled with the idea that they didn't have a clue, and that what we were being governed by was Boris Johnson's profoundly flawed personality. Venal, narcissistic, and lazy. And that was true. The path that we followed during the earliest days of the COVID crisis was defined by Boris Johnson's personality. Something had happened to our politics, partly as a consequence of Brexit, that opened the door to a trashing of traditions and norms. All of the checks and balances that were in place to stop a deeply flawed individual becoming Prime Minister, but in the event of them becoming a Prime Minister, being able to indulge their flaws and failings, had been trashed, had been rubbished. They'd thrown people out of Parliament. They'd prorogued it. They'd broken the sacred bond of trust between the Prime Minister and the monarch by sending Jacob Rees-Mogg to Scotland to lie to the Queen, the late Queen. They did they broke everything. They trashed everything. And it meant that, and the great genius galaxy brain, Dominic Cummings, was too stupid to see the inevitability of this. It meant that Boris Johnson's venality, narcissism and laziness became the defining elements of government policy at a moment of epic crisis. And this is the closest I've come to an insight since this whole crazy business started. Stop it. Stop looking for the game of 4D chess, or stop looking for the secret Rosetta Stone or skeleton key that would allow you to unlock the inner workings of Donald Trump's mind, and look instead at what you know. Look at the facts as they are in front of you. What the world is suffering from now is the imposition of a personality that is quite spectacularly petty, simplistic, and vindictive. You can add adjectives to that. Narcissistic, perhaps, would be more appropriate to Donald Trump than it would be to Boris Johnson. But that's it, isn't it? 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. Are we, in your opinion, are we wasting our time trying to understand what he's doing when what he's doing is, as Tony reminds us, what the man who told people to drink bleach is doing is simply doing what he has done for his entire life. He's seeking to impose his pettiness, his petty, simplistic and vindictive worldview on the entire world. You don't need to understand anything else. You will never know what is going to happen next. You don't know if we're going to be here for 4 more years. All you can know, what can you say with certainty? That's my phone in for the first hour of today. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. Are we looking at a situation where all the economists, all the bankers, all the experts, all the commentators, all the analysts, all the people who make fortunes from predicting the peaks and troughs of financial markets, the journalists, the broadcasters, the columnists, are we looking at a world in which we are all redundant? Just in this specific case. Are we all redundant? Because there is no magnificent map to draw. There is no incredible theory to frame. There is no unprecedented understanding to achieve. You have a petty, simplistic and vindictive narcissist treating the world like he's always treated people, treating the world like he's always treated businesses, like he's always treated laws, in the hope of what? There's a question you might answer, but the first question is this. And sadistic, that's what I meant by vindictive, Jamie. I think vindictive covers sadistic, doesn't it? Taking pleasure in causing pain. Is that it? 0345 6060973. How do you explain what Trump is doing? That's mine. You can agree with it or disagree with it. That's how I explain it. Petty, simplistic and vindictive narcissism that we are wasting our time trying to complicate, analyse or even understand. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I don't have the diagnostic tools to bring psychopathy into the conversation, but narcissism and psychopathy often go hand in hand. I'll tell you who I was thinking of this morning. I was thinking of King Canute. And the great misunderstanding of King Canute is, as you probably know, that he wasn't trying to stop the waves coming in. He was trying to prove to his barons and his court that he couldn't. So they thought he was all-powerful, and he was going, look, I'm not. I can't stop the waves coming in. And the poor fella must be possibly the most misrepresented leader in history, with the possible exception of Gordon Brown. He was doing the polar opposite of what he is remembered, almost on a legendary level, the polar opposite of what he is remembered for doing. But Trump seems to me to believe that he can. He seems to believe that by an effort of will, he can stop the tide coming in. He can defy gravity. His simplistic, vindictive and petty understanding of the world, he seems to think if he can get enough weight behind it, he can turn something that almost every qualified commentator thinks is an unqualified disaster into what? Into gold, into victory, into jackpot, into success. 23 after 10 is the time. Joe's in North Cheam. Joe, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say that I agree with part of what you said, that yes, his character is narcissistic, etc. But I also I disagree the fact that you don't need to understand him. I think understanding a kid with a tantrum is very important so that you don't play into whatever they're trying to draw circles around you.
Say that again.
So, for example, if you've got a kid that is throwing a tantrum, not understanding what the kid is doing, you would play in how the child would be drawing circles around you.
Okay.
So I think it's very important to understand what Trump is doing. Looking back at his history, look at how many businesses he bankrupted. The way he deals with politics is identical.
I completely agree with you. I'm pointing out that understanding it is really easy. I'm saying that the waste of time is thinking that it's really complicated or sophisticated. It is rather like understanding a toddler's tantrum.
But it is not that. But it is slightly complicated because the media doesn't really tell what's going on. For example, the tariffs that are going on, it's because that in the next 12 months, 7.6 trillion is a debt that will mature. That being paid with a 5% interest will cripple Trump cabinet. What he needs to do is to bring that down. There's only two ways of bringing it down. One is by causing mass job losses. Two, tariffs. So understanding that allows us to understand if we're
it's not a growing phone line. And so you mean forcing a recession?
Yes.
Yes. I think this is where we are at cross purposes, because you are seeing a plan, seeing a master plan, whereas John Bolton, just by dint of having been his national security advisor, isn't his therapist? He doesn't, or his psychologist, or his mind reader. But petty, simplistic vindictiveness actually explains things better than any attempt to impose a kind of blueprint on what is going on.
If you don't understand the complexity of
that's better. What did you do to your phone?
Sorry?
That's much better.
I took you off speaker.
Never put me on speaker. It's so vulgar.
I am so sorry.
Unbelievable behaviour. It's all right. You should be told.
I had to fact check the number. Is it 7 trillion or 7.6 trillion? I didn't want to lie.
No, fair enough.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
So basically, what he's doing now, the reason why he's forcing a recession, for example, if you want to fight the United States, apart from China, then they should know how to handle the increase of tariffs so that, for example, they would not allow Trump to get the easy exit of getting away or reducing the 5% increase in interest. If they don't want and they want to help Trump, then we need to find an exit. So this is why I'm saying that although it may seem not complicated, but there's inner works, cogs, into the deeper machine, the deeper state.
We shall see. And I mean, in some ways, you represent very effectively the windmill at which I'm tilting this morning. The idea that if we just concentrate hard enough, like those blooming magic eye pictures I used to talk about all the time, if you just concentrate hard enough, if you just look at the imagery in front of you, then somehow that hidden optical illusion will appear. The steam train will appear in the background. I think, Joe, it's fair to say you can see a steam train. I don't think you can. I don't think anyone can, but the impulse, the urge to search for it is almost irresistible. Thank you, Joe. Jennifer is in Eastleigh. Jennifer, what would you like to say?
I would like to say that I think it's just he loves the power, that he gets off on the power, and how much power has he got? He says something and the whole world crumbles beneath his feet.
So he'll be enjoying this?
He's loving it. I think he's absolutely loving it.
You can only really, I think, understand things if you could imagine, on some level, being in the shoes of the person to whom it is happening. So it doesn't matter whether it's a tragedy or a crime, or whether it is a sporting triumph or a political moment. And he is so odd that I can't imagine. Can you, sitting in the Oval Office, enjoying what is going on? It doesn't mean it's not what's happening, but we can't emotionally grasp that personality type.
Have you ever, what about arsonists come to mind? People serial arsonists, they set something on fire, then they come back and watch.
I'll tell you what, you're making me think that the question I'm actually asking this morning is about whether we're wasting our time on politics when we should be focusing on personality.
Well, I think so. It's not about politics at all. It's about power.
And how he feels in the moment.
Yeah.
And you think he's currently feeling good?
Yeah, he's feeling strong, powerful.
Yeah, I mean, if a life without conscience, without an inner voice, a life without shame, a life without any concept of consequences. To go back to Joe in North Cheam, I think the attitude to bankruptcies is really overlooked. I'll push it, I'll milk it, and if it all goes wrong, I'll walk away and leave someone else with the bill. And he's treating the United States of America like he treated his casinos.
Yeah. I mean,
take the money out, enjoy the chaos, and if it all goes wrong, walk away. I mean, there it is. Are we wasting time on politics when really we should be focusing on personality? And I'm wary of this, largely because none of us, or very few of us, are actually qualified to describe what they're seeing with Trump. And yet, even as I say those words, I remember that mental health nurse who rang in really early doors before the tariffs had even been, they'd been announced. They hadn't been implemented. When they were, of course, announced, everybody clever was queuing up to tell us to ignore him. Don't worry about what he says, just worry about what he does. The stupidest people of 2025. But the mental health nurse who rang in and said he'd come across incidences of narcissistic personality disorder in his life, in his 30-odd year career, and he'd only encountered 2 or 3 people who had it on anything like the scale that Donald Trump appears to have it. I wonder if we need to try to describe what that means, how that translates into the kind of behaviour that we're seeing. Threatening 50% tariffs, extra tariffs today on China would mean that they had a 103% tariff, which means that China, to import something from China into the United States, you have to pay for it twice. And then a little bit on top, 3% on top. I mean, an intervention of such obvious madness that understanding its implementation probably involves understanding madness rather than understanding markets. 104% tariff. I beg your pardon. Crucial difference. But that's bonkers, right? And the EU said, and again, this is stuff you might have missed because you're lucky you don't have to do this for a living. I'm joking. Wouldn't do anything else. Except possibly playing golf, Kidderminster Harriers. But luckily we've got a good one at the moment. The European Union offered 0 for 0 tariffs before this announcement was even happened. This has subsequently emerged. It's emerged overnight. He's been asked about it in the Oval Office. Ursula von der Leyen said, OK, on industrial materials, on industrial equipment, we'll do 0 for 0. And they said no. And they asked him about that today and said, is that not enough? And he said, no, it's not enough. So fairness is not enough. You see what I mean? How do you analyse that unless you have an understanding of the personality? And yet, I'm not going to lie to you, it feels a little bit like surrender in terms of what I do for a living. It feels a little bit like giving up. Oh, don't worry about the politics. It's all about the personality and quite possibly, not the mental health, but the diagnostic disorder, what it is that explains why he's doing what he's doing. And that's pretty close to where John Bolton goes this morning. And it's where I've gone with the petty, simplistic, vindictive. 10:32 is the time. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
And then the pendulum swings back to what might be a more traditional analysis, which we'll take on this occasion from Emma. Get your fill on the politics side from the scavengers gathering like hyena behind him. Trump is not a normal human being. His motivations have always been utterly transparent. Never forget that he's the dead cat. And you can hang your hat on that for 10 minutes. You can derive, I think, comfort from certainty or comfort from knowledge. You'd rather know. I'm reading a Vera novel at the moment, the latest Anne Cleeve's Vera novel at the moment, which might seem like an odd dropping off point, but is pertinent because they're searching for a missing girl. And Vera said in the chapter I read in bed last night, I just want to find her, even if she's dead. I just want to know where she is, the frustration of not knowing. So I think that's what we're driven by. Even if it's really depressing and unattractive, I'd rather know than not know. So for a moment there, I think, yeah, Emma's right. He's the dead cat. It's all these people lining up behind him that are the real reason why he's doing the things that he's doing. But most of them are really getting cross now about what he's doing. So unless there is some meta explanation of how people like Peter Thiel, because Elon Musk seems to be spooked. A couple of other very big shot donors are spooked. One of them talking about an economic nuclear winter kicking in as a consequence of what he's done. So even that doesn't work. That's what I mean by the almost human impulse to come up with an answer. What if there aren't any? What if it is all about his personality, as John Bolton seems to me to be suggesting in the newspaper this morning? What if it is simply down to his petty, and these are my words, not Bolton's, his petty, simplistic and vindictive view of the world, or, if you want to get diagnostic or medical about it, his narcissism? And I mean, it feels like thin ice, but it's possibly the ice that we are all walking on. And a few of you picking up on this. Andy's looked it up, which is always helpful. And the kind of disorder that we are talking about is described as characterized by persistent, non-bizarre delusions, i.e. false belief. So it's not a belief that the moon is made of cheese or, I don't know, the vaccines don't work, but it's the belief that tariffs in this way can make America the richest country in history, that persists despite evidence to the contrary. Or maybe vaccines do fit into this worldview, actually, and are often accompanied by a lack of insight into the irrationality of those beliefs. So you've got a delusional disorder. Should we be talking to doctors rather than economists? And I guess that leads us to the question of whether have you ever known anyone even a tiny bit like him? 0345 60 60973. John's in Oakley. John, what do you think?
I've known a few people like him, but they've never won a popularity contest that has thrusted them into the most important job.
Well, that's why he's unique in a way, isn't it? Because enough people are persuaded that he is all the things he says that he is.
But he is, because people have allowed him to be, but he's got no talent. He doesn't seem to be particularly smart. I just think he's an idiot. And every time I hear. Every time he makes this, like it was 2 weeks ago. Sorry, I'm jumping. I'm doing a Trump. I'm jumping from one thing to another.
What does he call it?
The weave.
The weave. Yeah, go on. You weave away, John. I've done a bit of weaving this morning. You fill your boots.
The largest security breach in the history of the United States was 2 weeks ago. We've not even mentioned it today. That's insane. What I think when I think about Trump, if you'd allow me to, I can't quote literature from 100 years ago, but from Red Dwarf.
Yes, go on.
The time drive was frozen. Rimmer asks, do you think it's because of the subspace conduits have locked with the transponder calibrations and caused a major trachyon surge that has overloaded the time matrix? And Crichton replies, no, sir, you've just been jabbing it too hard.
You're a genius.
And I think that's a bit like analysing Trump.
You're a genius. Did you do that from memory?
No.
You've got it written down in front of you.
It's not Mystery Hour. I Googled it.
Yeah, you are allowed to Google when we're not in Mystery Hour. I'd be lost without. Do that again, will you? Just do that again slowly, so that I can sort of clip it up later.
The time drive had frozen, and Rimmer asks, do you think it's because the subspace conduits have locked with the transponder calibrations and caused a major tachyon surge that has overloaded the time matrix? Crichton replies, no, sir, it's just you've been jabbing it too hard.
So we're stroking our chins, and it is just the case of petty, simplistic.
He's just an idiot. He'll be on to the next thing in 2 weeks, and people won't be talking about the time.
Yeah, but that's why he's also a genius. That's why he's also a genius, because no one else can do this. No one else can do this. Whatever you want to call it.
People could do it, but they'd have to have no soul.
Yeah.
No care for anyone. No care for the person who's just retired, and they're looking at they're weighing up their options for their pension, how they're going to live the rest of their life, and they've just, I don't know, they've got a few £100,000. Now they've got less.
Yeah.
He don't care.
He doesn't, does he? He doesn't care.
The veterans that he's laid off.
Yeah. Doesn't care. The people nothing matters. Nothing but except what? Except what? What matters to him?
That he's the man.
Is that it?
That people are bowing down to him.
Everyone's looking at me. Everyone's bending the knee. Everyone's talking about me. I want to be the biggest reality television show of all time is what I want to be.
World leaders and kings are coming to me wanting good tariff deals. That's what he wants. He wants a third state visit. I don't know.
So you brought... that is one of my favourite contributions to the programme in a very long time, John. And I'm just going to spoil it slightly by saying there is no need to say I'm not quoting literature from 100 years ago. It's Doug Naylor, isn't it? And Rob, I forget the name of the second writer, which is bad of me because I've met him. But really good art, whether it's a television comedy or whether it's a Shakespeare play, tells us truths about humanity, and you've just absolutely smashed that truth. We're all sitting here wondering whether it's the subspace conduits or whatever it was, and it is just the case that we're watching a bull in a china shop. We're watching a toddler having a massive tantrum. There's still another dimension to it, which is how he gets away with it and why he is so, quotes, good at it.
Well, you can't end the show there. You've got to carry on, James.
Well, you see, you're doing it all now. You're producing me as well. And the other thing you've done when you talked about a soul is, should we be talking about priests, doctors and priests, or clerics, rabbis, imams, rather than economists and analysts or holodecks? Or there's that Star Trek or Red Dwarf. John, mate, absolute top of the class today. That is it. I'm almost going to have to get that printed out so I can read it back myself. But that simple imagery of people sitting around stroking their chins, as opposed to choking their shins, which I nearly said. Stroking their chins, trying to work it out. And maybe that is hey, come here a minute. Maybe that is part of the answer to the question of how he gets away with it. Because we're still sitting there trying to work out how on earth he got away with the security breach, and he's just introduced tariffs. And you can sit there and stroke your chin and say, I think you'll find he's only introduced the tariffs to distract attention away from the security breach. But that's not true. The answer to how both things happened will be the same. and it is probably not very complicated. Steve's in Manchester. Steve, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. I've been scribbling notes while I've been on hold. I hope I can make some sense of it. I wanted to return back to the mental health thing. I have worked in mental health, but I'm not supremely qualified, and that's not the basis of my calling. Well, I mean, we can look through lenses, and I agree with everything that's been said so far.
Yeah.
The reality show lens, WWE, the mobster lens, the con man lens. But there's a thing in psychiatry and psychology called the Goldman Rule. Or no, sorry, the Goldwater Rule, okay?
Yeah.
It goes back to the 1960s, which sort of makes it official that it's taboo to diagnose someone without being in a clinical setting.
Okay.
However, it is, you can look that up, the Goldwater Rule. It's Goldwater as in the US politician, funnily enough.
Barry.
But it's been challenged by a succession of professionals. The most notable is, or the one who led the charge on this, is called Bandy Lee, B-A-N-D-I is her first name.
Okay.
Lee is the surname. And there's a couple of similar professionals called John Gartner and Harry Siegel who do a YouTube show. I know that sounds a bit...
We're going to run out of time with all the name checks. So the Goldwater Rule, in a nutshell, tells us that we shouldn't do what we're about to do, but we're going to.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Because he's the most filmed person in history. So, you know, dementia. They say he's got narcissistic personality or disorder, which is hardly a consensus thing to sort of say.
No.
But also that he has advancing dementia. Now, his niece is called Mary Trump. You may be aware of her. She's a clinical psychologist.
Right.
And she'll go along with all this. And the examples of what demonstrate the dementia, there's a thing called anemic aphasia, which is this sort of slurring of words and not quite completing words properly, which were more prevalent during the campaign, probably when he was more stressed, especially at night time, because he's also an addict. We have to remember this isn't particularly contentious. There's a guy called Noel Kassler who used to work with him on The Apprentice, who testifies that he's an Adderall user, and Adderall is amphetamine. I've used Adderall because I've got ADHD, as you can probably tell by the way I'm talking, right? So basically, later at night, it's bad, and he used to do all his campaign rallies in the last campaign. He tried to do them earlier. So the main punchline of what I'm trying to say, James, and it's very serious and it's very disturbing, and I don't know what to do about it. The guy is genuinely mad. It's not just colloquially mad. It is the genuinely mad king. And he has dementia. His father had dementia. That's what the weave is all about. That's why he keeps banging on about.
How then? And I guess, and I'm enjoying this conversation, and you're not going to believe this, but someone actually mentioned Brandy Lee in a text about 2 minutes before you came on. So
there you go.
Proof once again of the calibre of my callers, or that we're all singing from a similar hymn sheet. The question then becomes, how does he get away with it?
I think people have been, whether they like him or not, people have been sort of subsumed into
we're losing the phone line. I'll give you a chance, but
okay.
Be warned.
People have been I think people have just become in awe either of how much they like him for various stupid reasons, or because of how they just can't get a grip on how mad he is. It's so colossal. And I think that probably goes back to the reality TV thing. Because, of course, nothing is less real than reality TV. But because he played a business person on TV...
Everyone thinks he is this business genius. And in the great... And I've had a couple of unfortunate experiences on television myself, but in the great annals of things that never should have happened, putting him in that role where he could cast himself as a business genius may have been one of the greatest mistakes in the history of Western democracy. Steve, you're on top form this morning, and I'm grateful to you. And I love that. I hadn't come across the Goldwater Rule before. It explains exactly the misgivings that I have when I say that perhaps we should be talking to doctors and possibly even priests or clerics when it comes to understanding what is going on. Because talking to economists and political pundits appears to me to be, and I speak as someone who is sort of one of them, appears to me to be a bit of a waste of time. What do you reckon? It's 10:48.
James O'Brien on LBC.
9:51 is the time. And part of the problem, I've got to tell you, I'm enjoying this conversation more than I expected to. I'm enjoying it enormously, thanks to you, chiefly. So thank you for bringing such pearls of wisdom to the table today. And yet, we're never going to break free completely of the cult of analysis, the belief that you can't leave it all to the doctors and the priests. You have to have, quotes, experts, end quotes, trying to unravel what's happening. And the two people you need to look at in that context, I think, are Peter Thiel, who set up PayPal with Elon Musk, and a blogger, a far-right blogger called Curtis Yarvin, who is heavily associated, or indeed the founder of the so-called Dark Enlightenment movement, or neo-reactionary. They are anti-democratic and anti-egalitarian, which, of course, everybody on the far right is. But the idea that they genuinely want to break everything, and this is where Trump becomes the combination of useful idiot and dead cat, which is funny, really, because he is a useful idiot and it looks like he's got a dead cat on his head. But Trump is the combination of useful idiot and dead cat, and the real string pullers are characters like Thiel and Yarvin. My objection to that is that it posits that Trump is controllable. But then people thought Johnson was controllable, didn't they? I don't know how many parallels there are between Trump and Johnson, but I'll tell you this. Even with a narcissistic lunatic in Downing Street, our parliament and our checks and our balances and our democracy was still up to the job of getting him out. Imagine if Boris Johnson had been able to impose whatever he wanted on the country, or indeed our relationships with the world, without any parliamentary approval, without checks and balances. Imagine if the system didn't include what was needed to bust him for lying through his teeth to the House of Commons. Just pointing that out. We don't have a written constitution, and America does, but at the moment we seem to be better suited, better prepared, probably because our unwritten constitution is born of denuding monarchy of power. So we know what a crazy king looks like. We've had a few. And that perhaps is why our system of an unwritten constitution actually has a better limit upon the power of the executive than the United States has managed. I don't know. There's a lot to cover today. But I think this question about doctors and priests as opposed to economists and pundits, understand what he's doing means understanding him. It's one of the lines in the John Bolton piece that I really recommend to you today. It's not gospel, nothing is at the moment, but the phrase is his one immutable focus is himself. Understand that everything is about him, and nothing else matters. So how does this work? A problem we've got now, because I want to ask you if you've ever dealt with anyone who's a little bit like him, or you've ever dealt with anyone who's like him. The only person I can think of is Boris Johnson, who I've not had personal dealings with particularly. But what will he be feeling now? Who's qualified to answer that question? Is it possible he's loving this? If you can't answer that, you can't really answer the question of what he's doing or why he's doing it. You see what I mean? Dan's in Ashford. Dan, what would you like to say?
I've got a few things. So, just to start, so I remember seeing a programme quite a few years ago with one of his friends, old friends, was talking and says he wants to go down as a great man in history. And I think that is the simple thing for his entire behaviour. He wants to be remembered in 1,000 years as the absolute world genius who made America the richest country. All the workers were rich.
It already was.
Everything was brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, all of the general public.
Yeah.
He doesn't care.
He wants to be adored on a scale that transcends mortality.
Yes. That's exactly it. It's at the end of his life, nearly. What's he, 86? He knows he hasn't got another 30 years.
Well.
So now he's looking at, I want a massive gold statue of me. You know, remember the Gaza Tower?
Yeah, and talk about him. You see, here's another example of doing the thing where don't worry about what he says, focus on what he does. People are talking about putting him on Mount Rushmore.
Well, that's this. I think this is what I'm going to stop the wars. I'm going to get the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
I'm going to go down as Julius Caesar. They still talk about him, don't they? You know, I want to go down as William Shakespeare. That's what he's long term, and I think that's one of the key points of being a psychopath, isn't it? It's the unrealistic long term goals. and things like that, utter delusion. But can I just say a couple of things? Like at the moment, I think he's got into a place where no one's going to be able to stand up to him because he's just put all his little followers around him.
Yes.
It reminds me of Hitler in World War II with his generals when they're retreating from the Russians.
Yes.
He's getting involved and saying, "No, we're not going to retreat. We're not going to do anything tactically like a general would." And then it's too late. And the Allied general said the greatest general we've got is actually Hitler. And I think Trump's now in that position where he's free, that the shackles are off. He can do what he wants, and it's just not working. This economic policy that he's had, and he's got a 100% confidence but 1% ability.
Yeah.
And he's now just allowing himself just to be exposed, basically.
He sees himself, this is nice from Lee, he sees himself as a brilliant, misunderstood surgeon conducting a radical but life-saving operation. He's risked it all and will win in the end in his head, and that will deliver the level of repute and fame and immortality that you're describing. And that takes me back to the point about shoes. Dan, you and I can't imagine being like that. You see some behaviours and you think, God, if the cards had fallen differently, maybe I'd have been that much of a wally. Or if the cards had fallen differently, maybe I'd have been. Or if I was that rich, maybe I'd have behaved like that. And you can always do it, but you can't do it with what you're describing. The idea of, Boris Johnson wanted to be world king, of course, so another parallel there. But the idea of being obsessed with legacy on that kind of level is just alien to 99.9 recurring % of the population, and always will be.
Well, it seems to be he's the person that's risen to the top of the in America, isn't it? It's that 1%. It's not even a 1%, was it?
It's a tiny percentage of a percentage. I think Hitler ended up blaming, Nick in Caterham certainly says that he did, ended up blaming the German people for his failure.
Of course.
Which would fit with it as well,
Trump's
because nothing can dent the self-image and the self-regard, which is so fragile and yet so thick in terms of the thickness of armour at the same time. It's another anomaly or oxymoron. He's incredibly hypersensitive, and yet his skin is as thick as a rhinoceros's in some ways.
Can I add just one more little point?
Yeah, of course you can.
I think it's quite an interesting tell. I noticed when he was on Joe Rogan's show, Joe Rogan's naturally obsessed with aliens and how they're going to get here, and is it possible? So he wanted to really see if he could get Trump to sort of admit to, do you know about aliens, Trump? Trump saying, I've never really thought of it, never really thought of anything like that. Haven't thought about the subject. And you could tell he was thinking, what do I say? And he just started naming planets, going, there's Jupiter and there's Neptune. And I'm like, you really haven't thought, have you? You've never, ever, ever thought about this subject.
And yet, in his own mind.
This is his worldview.
Yeah.
He's never thought of anything.
It's incredible. Do you remember when he was asked what his favourite bit of the Bible was? He was being interviewed by some Christians first time round. Like Christian broadcasters, and they said, "Of course you're a Christian." Yeah, I'm a very big Christian. I'm a great Christian. And he goes, "And do you read the Bible?" I read the Bible every night, or something like that. He goes, "What's your favourite bit?" And it's a bit like when you're being interviewed for a job, or you're applying for a university or something like that, and you get asked a question and you can't answer it, and for a moment there's just blind. Yeah, exactly that. Tell me about this period here between two, and he said all of it. So what's your favourite bit? The Bible is the biggest bloody book on most people's bookshelves. He said all of it, because he's obviously never opened it. He couldn't even think of a single story.
Just said Adam and Eve or
I know he could, but that's the bit, isn't it, about this simultaneous idiocy and a form of genius. I don't use that word lightly, because every contribution to the programme will fall at the next question, which is how does he get away with it? Because, like Putin, Putin puts an oligarch in power. In prison. Everyone's scared of him. Trump's trying to get to that point. So I will destroy you. I'm not going to lock you up in Siberia, but I will destroy you, and you will become a social pariah. Your political career will be over. You bend the knee or you disappear. And I suppose the people who are prepared to disappear, like the guy I really like, the Mooch, Anthony Scaramucci, hasn't disappeared, of course. He's a podcaster who does great work, but he is so far away from the seat of power that it is a form of banishment or exile. So Putin, oh gosh, got another one. That's it. You do what I want. however ridiculous it may be, or it's banishment and exile for you, pal. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how powerful you are, how famous you are, or how successful you are historically as a politician. You either bend the knee to me, despite the fact you know exactly what I am, what I represent, and how dangerous I could prove to be, or you get banished, you get exiled. First time in a while, I feel we're making real progress. It is 11:01.
James O'Brien on LBC.
5 minutes after 11 is the time. I just saw the phrase woke left in my inbox for the first time in a long time. I mean, how's that going for you, lads? All the people who could never really tell you exactly what woke meant, but were absolutely adamant that Donald Trump was the guy to deal with it, and that's why you wanted him back in the White House, so he could deal with all those woke lefties. Like, I don't know, just heard the head of Goldman Sachs having a worry. Bill Ackman is the billionaire supporter who described the path ahead if he sticks with these tariffs as economic apocalypse, or no, a nuclear winter, an economic nuclear winter. Extraordinary, really, to think how many people voted for him to get rid of the woke left without being able to tell you what the woke left was. But anyway, those of us who are also unable to tell you what the woke left is, but definitely fully paid up members of it, are once again being proved right about absolutely everything. And that is perhaps part of the answer to some of the questions that we are asking this morning. Anybody, Lee puts it best, he doesn't get away with it. He's under scrutiny more than any other person on the planet, but he gets a pass from about 30% of the electorate, which keeps him in play, while the other 70% are in disarray. Doesn't explain the media, but it perhaps explains the electorate. And I disagree with Andy in Rochester. One of the most interesting things is the American public voted for Trump knowing what he is like. Make of that what you will. I don't think they do know what he's like. I think they think, this is going to be a bit of a tongue twister, I think they think he's like what he says he is. It's almost an Eminem lyric, that, isn't it? I am what I say I am. Except in Eminem's case, it's true. So Donald Trump says, I am a very stable genius. I am Ozymandias. I am worthy of a place on Mount Rushmore. I am the greatest thing ever to have drawn breath. And they believe him. So they don't know necessarily that he's a narcissistic man-child. They think he is. And that's where The Apprentice probably played a really huge role in the mythology. And that's a great word to use because it is a mythology. People believe in myths, Andy, don't they? And then those of us who know that they're myths sit here in incredulity and wonder, how can anyone believe in that myth? Even religion. You want to talk about religion in that context. It's certainly cultish, the support. How can you believe that? And they think we're stupid for not believing it. So I don't think it is a mystery that that people fall for it, continue to fall for it, vote for it. His success, writes Carl, is not due to any inherent talent. It's due to the failures of others to challenge his forceful and vindictive personality. He succeeds because of others' fear. I think that's true. All the most potent analysis and pungent analysis this morning is of his personality, not of his politics or his political decisions, because the latter is simply a symptom of the former, which is why John Bolton's point about him being essentially, I mean, what's the word we want? It's almost like unbelievably self-obsessed. Everything is through the lens of his own grandiosity. And Louise is answering the question of whether or not anybody has ever dealt with anybody similar. And she tells me, I was married to a narcissist. My brother is a psychiatrist and will agree. They are damaged people. Their core is deep shame and inadequacy. This is what I meant about the weird juxtaposition of very thick skin with epic fragility, epic hypersensitivity. They are damaged people. Their core is deep shame and inadequacy. So they deflect with very worrying consequences. They convince themselves that they are above all others, that they are special, that they are chosen. They're often very charming, but all those responses are learnt and never meant. They are outraged if anybody crosses them. They have zero introspection of their actions, only a deep obsession to fulfill their own needs. There will be no happy ending. Just look at what happened when Biden won the election. He will stop at nothing. I don't know how healthy it is to open up the phone lines to the question of whether or not you've dealt with a narcissist, and that those dealings give you an insight into who Trump is, and an insight into who Trump is perhaps provides an insight into what he will do. The question I'm going to add to the list this hour is probably what happens next. 0345 60 60973, because you can have a crack at that using the old tools. You see what I mean? Understanding why he's doing what he's doing, I think, defies traditional analysis. It means that doctors and priests are more use than pundits and economists. But what happens next, that just simply involves taking in the events that have unfolded and that are unfolding and making a bet on where they are likely to lead. You can do that still, I think. We'll find out. But first, Pat is in San Pedro in Spain. Pat, what would you like to say?
Hola, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
James, this thing about what happens next, I'd like to address that if I can very quickly.
Yeah, of course.
But just before, there's just something I want to round off from your previous hour's conversation.
But it's kind of carrying on anyway, Pat, so you fill your boots.
Yeah, it's probably a good segue. This whole thing, everyone gets caught up in the typhoon that is Trump, and we're all trying to understand him, what happens next. And I think we all know that he doesn't know what happens next, so how the hell have we got a chance? And I think... Is it Kidderminster your hometown, James?
It is indeed, yes.
So imagine this. Real Madrid come up with a new tactic and they sign a great big 6'11" clod-hopping centre forward from Kidderminster Town's second team.
Yeah.
They play him in the Champions League.
Don't really have a second team. But anyway, sorry, that's me splitting hairs. Carry on. Go on then.
They bang him into the penalty area. All the corners come raking in. All the defenders are around the giant, while all the playmakers just get the ball and just slide it in.
Yeah.
That, to me, is who Trump is to the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025. He is the perfect fire that they set to get people to run to try and put out while they get on with their long-planned dastardly deeds, as it were. So, and
he's not perfect. He's not perfect because he's unpredictable and self-obsessed, but he's the best available.
He's the best. He's actually more than that. I think he's the best applicable because of his vicissitudes. He makes so much noise that makes people look away.
Down to the ground. Yes.
Yeah, it's perfect for them. It's absolutely.
Did you hear the caller?
So,
Did you hear the sort of gasp in his voice when he said it's 2 weeks since the signal? And everyone listening goes, "Oh my days, 2 weeks!" Which is why my trail this morning, the little clip they played towards the end of Nick's show, simply said, "Can this really go on for 4 more years?"
Well, I think with Trump it probably can't. That's another side to this story. This story really is all about those dark masters at the Heritage Foundation Project 25. So it's your Curtis Yarvins, it's your Peter Thiels, that long streaky...
Thiel, apparently. I mispronounced that. I've been corrected. I'm sure I got corrected when I said Thiel to Thiel, and now I've said Thiel and everyone's saying Thiel. Do we know what it actually is, Pat?
Well, I would change it to another word, but we're on
Teal.
Radio.
No, don't do that. It's me that gets punished. Teal. We're running with Teal for the time being. And to be clear, we do have a B team. I don't want to get thrown out of Agborough next time I'm there. I just thought it was an amusing interruption. So and
that from every direction here.
That explains Vance. That explains Vance. Vance is there as the heir apparent.
Sir, that's exactly what I was coming on to. I was just going to mention another one of the Dark Masters, and that's that awful Stephen. What's his name?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. He looks like
Miller.
Stephen Miller, the dark progeny of a threesome between Gollum, Goebbels and Putin. An appalling man. But he's part of that inner sanctum. These are the guys that have been working on this and planning this. Now, Vance, he is I hate to apply this word to Vance, but he is the intellectual that they intend to put in place when Trump implodes or when they choose to explode Trump. Yeah. So he's part of the plan, and that's why you've seen this guy have this, sort of Damascene change event from calling Trump Hitler to actually espousing.
Because they promised him the earth. They promised him the earth.
They promised him the earth, and he sees that the plan here. Project 2025 is already underway. There's no way Trump would have done as much as he's done in 2 months. I mean, that's far beyond any of his very limited capabilities. So this has all been in train, and they are looking to completely disassemble, everything that's happening with the tariffs, everything that's happening with, cancelling the Department of Education, all of the Doge layoffs with Musk. Mm-hmm. It's all there to completely crumble the US into a pile of dust that they can reform to something else. Now, that something else is an oligarchy. That something else is not about the public good at all. It's all about
what people won't know, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what people won't know is that they don't hide it. I mean, the more you dig into this, and you clearly have dug into it, for the record, more than I have, but phrases like anti-equality and anti-democratic are not controversial in the circles you're describing. Anti-democracy is the point. I mean, Thiel has said democracy.
Made it fashionable.
Yes, democracy is the problem. It's this idea. It makes me think of, I don't know, I keep referring back to novels, things that haunt me from novels. Like, people living on the street. I mean, abject, epic poverty beyond anything.
Dystopia.
Yes, but I know we have homeless people living on the street, but I mean, people who had a job. I'm going to tie myself in knots in what I'm trying to describe, but the acceptance of poverty, that line from the hymn.
I so agree with you. I so agree. Yeah. And it's not only the acceptance of it, it's let it happen, but don't let it happen anywhere where we can see or feel it. And we're not responsible for it. So let it go into create its own sort of nest somewhere, and we don't have to worry about it. And what worries me even more, James, even if we go beyond the whole sort of tariff thing and what comes next there, what worries me more is this huge rise in Gen Z who are saying that they prefer to go to the right. They prefer a dictator. There was a recent survey done in the UK.
It wasn't quite as scary as it was. It wasn't quite as scary as you were told. The more you dug into that, the less accurate the headline actually was. But there's a direction of traffic that is of profound concern, and it's tied in some ways to the manosphere, to the Andrew Tate. So-called influencers.
Which is also tied to the financial crash in 2008 and then COVID. I mean, everything that politicians have done in almost every nation has told people that we are not for you, we're not helping you, we're only making it worse. And little wonder that Gen Z's gone that way, and little wonder that a poorly educated America across all age strata can gather that way as well to help to make this Project 2025 thing work.
Well, there it is. And there's everybody's homework for today. And it is worth digging into. I'd also introduce you, perhaps, not Pat, I sense, but perhaps a few people will be unaware of the word dominionists. I rely on Emma, who's one of my most tireless correspondents, to keep me up to speed with some of this, but I don't know the half of it because it sometimes sounded fanciful. And yet, what word would you have used to describe 5 years ago even? Never mind 10 years ago, before Brexit even happened, predictions of where the West has gone in the last decade. If someone had told you of the things that would happen. Oh, yeah, I'll tell you what, we'll have a Prime Minister who'll send someone to the Queen to lie, and we'll treat him like a messiah. We'll trust him with everything. That's just on this side of the Atlantic. Hop over the other side of the Atlantic and describe what's happened. January the 6th being perhaps the biggest flashpoint, although where we are now is in danger of overtaking it. Fanciful wouldn't touch the sides, would it? You'd say I can't say that on the radio. You would reach for a much stronger word than fanciful. If someone had described in 2016 what is happening, or 2015 what is happening now, you'd have thought that they'd completely taken leave of their senses. But some people have joined some of the dots, and most of the lines, when the dots are joined, lead back to, as Pat has pointed out, Project 2025 and dominionists. It makes sense of a lot of the stuff that's weird, up to and including the United States moving its embassy in Israel. But even as I say those words out loud, I think I'm sounding bonkers, right? And that's the word you would have used in 2015 to describe anyone who has accurately, or has turned out to be right in the predictions that they made then. It's 11:18.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 20 minutes after 11 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So, making progress today, at least I feel we are. So, if you disagree, then fair enough. But the futility, that's a lovely word, the futility of trying to analyse the politics without looking at everything through the lens of the personality. And the personality is petty, simplistic, vindictive. Or, if you want to get diagnostic about it, narcissistic, to the point of delusion. That is an area I'm keen to explore further. Louise's message about being married to a narcissist, giving her insights into what is happening and even what may be happening next. But you want to understand, in the context of tariffs, you look at them until you're blue in the face. You look at them until your head explodes. You've got to look at him. You've got to look at tariffs through him. So this is correct. This is a good analysis, which I stumbled across on Blue Sky from a former journalist and think tank, I think it was at the BBC once. Trump doesn't understand trade and thinks tariffs are great. He hates admitting he's ever wrong, no matter the evidence. The people around him are rationally terrified and know that he'll see contradiction as disloyalty. That's brilliant. A guy called Giles Wilkes. Because that is all about Trump. You want to understand the tariffs, you need to understand Trump. He doesn't understand trade. He thinks tariffs are great. He's been telling you that since the 1980s. But of course, all the experts told us, all the people that once stood in a lift with him for 10 minutes told, hey, don't worry about what he says. I've known Donald Trump for 15 minutes. Don't worry about what he says. Just worry about what he does. To which the simple response would have been, what? You mean like January the 6th? That attempted coup, where he sent a bloodthirsty mob after his own vice president, and you have continued to support him since. You mean like that stuff? We're supposed to focus on, or do we ignore that as well, champ? He hates admitting he's ever wrong, no matter the evidence, and that's because narcissism is rooted in shame and pain. Not that I want you necessarily to feel sorry for him, but you admit that you're wrong, and it breaks something inside you. It starts an unraveling that you can't ever necessarily stop or control, and then the people around him are rationally terrified. That is banishment and exile. That's where I moved from Red Dwarf to Shakespeare. That is banishment and exile. That's like Kent in the first act of King Lear, or more likely Cordelia. You do not tell me that you love me. Cordelia in the first act of King Lear. This is what I meant earlier about great art speaking through the ages, about the human condition. If you don't know the story, he's got 3 daughters. They're all offered a third of the kingdom. All they have to do is make a really impassioned public pronouncement of their love for him. So the first 2, Goneril and Regan, give it the full 9 yards. They give it the full, both barrels. You are amazing. They speak about him like Donald Trump speaks about himself. That's how much hyperbole and froth and frill there is in place. So they give it their absolute best. And then Cordelia, the one that actually loves him, spoiler alert, tiny spoiler alert, it's kind of obvious in Act 1, Scene 1. I thought the king had more affected the Duke of Albany than Cornwall. There you go. Cordelia just says, I love you as a daughter should love her father. It's not word for word. I'm not that good. But that's the point. And it's not enough for him. It's not enough for Lear, who probably has a touch of narcissism to him, but not the full portion because he's capable of conscience and regret. I love you as a daughter should love her father, nothing more and nothing less. And then Lear says, nothing will come of nothing, daughter, speak again. And he banishes her because through a sort of adolescent stubbornness, she can't tell him what he wants to hear. So she gets banished, she gets exiled, which is why this analysis talks about rationally terrified of him. You're rationally terrified of him. I know he's monstrous. I know he's hideous. I know that Pat in San Pedro might be right, and it's all part of a much bigger, much nastier scheme to completely dismantle democracy in America and return it to a kind of rich man in his castle, poor man at his gate. God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate worldview, which was, sung in kindergartens in our lifetimes. So you get him, and then the rest of it begins to make sense. He can't admit he's ever wrong, no matter what the evidence is, and the people that might stop him will be banished and exiled, because this is what narcissists do, is they don't respond to a threat with an equal and opposite force, or even with a slightly bigger force. Like someone punches you, you punch them twice. Someone punches a narcissist, they pull out a bazooka. And that is what he's doing with trade. So China come back with what is truly a reciprocal tariff. They say, okay, you're going to hurt us. We're going to try to hurt you about the same. All right? That's reciprocal. And Trump responds to that by saying, right, I'm bringing in a 104% tariff on. I mean, it just doesn't even make sense on any level unless you understand 2 things. He doesn't understand trade and he thinks tariffs are great. He hates admitting that he's wrong, no matter what the evidence might be. So there it is. And another person that I am quite an admirer of, because he is in that small band of merry men who've been proved completely right about Brexit, an economist called David Hennig, says that I regret to inform you that the horrible truth is that an old man with a tariff obsession has been given almost unlimited power in the world's richest economy. He also points out, which is something of an elephant in the room at the moment, including for Keir Starmer, globalisation is something that the US and the UK has done quite well out of. We've made mistakes and we've done other things wrong, but look at the world order, we're quite rich. So that's it. That's the secret to understanding him. But none of that helps you get a grasp or a grip on what is likely to happen next, because that depends on reality. Someone who doesn't subscribe to reality is doing things in reality. So reality responds. Don't know how. Richard is in Hertford. Richard, what made you pick up the phone, if you can remember, after that somewhat unexpected diversion?
Good morning, James. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. What's on your mind?
Investment banker visiting England. I've been living there in America since 1989. You're watching a sideshow.
Go on.
This is entertainment. This has got nothing to do with politics. This is pure entertainment. The reality...
Well, it's not very entertaining for people whose pensions have been wiped out.
I understand it's not entertaining, but the reality of this, the end result of this, will be a dollar depreciation. The dollar will end up weaker against all major world currencies, and that's the aim. All of this is designed for that.
And what does that achieve?
It achieves a very competitive US dollar at a time when the US dollar right now is too expensive versus the rest of the world. And
just talk me through the chain reaction, the dominoes that fall. So what happens next? Because how can he know how China will respond, for example?
Because it's already been arranged. All of these tariffs that you see will end up becoming washes. So if China's 50% tariff is implied upon them, China will respond with the identical.
Yes.
Every tariff will be met with an equal tariff. Therefore,
respectfully, it won't, because already some countries are. The EU has already offered 0 for 0, and other countries are already opening negotiations. Japan, for example, are already opening negotiations on what he wants from them in return for dropping the tariffs that he's put on them. And the 0 for 0 offer, which, as you described, they'll be equal and opposite. He said that's not good enough. So already two of the biggest.
It's not good enough.
No, but you just said that he'd accept those, and he hasn't. He's already rejected.
He won't accept anything. The only thing that's worth watching here is the bond market's reaction and the dollar's reaction against major currencies, because that's where the end result is.
Okay, and then what are they doing at the moment?
Actually, yesterday they're beginning to improve, and they'll continue to improve. The dollar will drop against major currencies, and the 10-year bond will stabilize at around 4, slightly less, slightly more, and that will be stable.
And for the average American, this is good news because...
The average American doesn't see any of this.
Okay.
The average American is spending in US dollars and doesn't know anything else.
Okay. Thank you for that. It's coming up to 11:30. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Dominic Ellis is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:32 is the time. An awful lot of love for this quote. And it is still, for me, going further than any of the other explanations that we've heard today. The time drive has frozen, says Crichton in Red Dwarf, and it's Rob Grant and Doug Naylor are the names of the writers. It is a work of genius, Red Dwarf. If you're not familiar with it, you really should be. And Rimmer responds, "Let me see," and asks, "Do you think it's because the subspace conduits have locked with the transponder calibrations and caused a major tachyon surge that has overloaded the time matrix?" To which Crichton says, "No, sir, I've just been jabbing it too hard." So I don't know. Maybe there is some method in the madness, but you've got to understand the madness before you can get a handle on the method. Does that mean that you can have a crack? Thank you for all the nice words today as well. I'm not going to lie to you. I've struggled a bit finding my way into these stories. I think largely because we look at the politics and the economics, not at the personality. But now I think we've got our lens, if not quite our Rosetta Stone, to translate everything, then certainly our lens through which to look at everything. It might limit our conversations moving forward, but we can at least make sense of some of the stuff that is going on. Israel also, of course, offered a 0 for 0 tariff, as Nina reminds us, and that got turned down as well. So it definitely isn't fair trading that Trump is looking for. He's looking for dominion over the whole world. And again, that little voice in the back of my head says, calm down, mate. But at what point do you not calm down? Have we got enough now to answer the question of what happens next? 0345 6060973. What happens next? Do we know? How does it end? Does this go on for 4 more years? And these perhaps are questions that are too big to contemplate, or too big to answer, too awful to contemplate. Who knows? 0345 6060973. 11:34 is the time. David says, your previous caller's attempt to rationalise this through the markets is directly contradicting everything I've heard every market expert say. Doesn't mean he's wrong, just lonely. But yeah, I mean, that certainly is where I was finding my thoughts going. Kevin is in Liverpool. Kevin, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Good morning.
Kevin,
yes,
hello.
Can you hear me, James?
Yeah, loud and clear. What's on your mind?
Yes, I've got experience, it almost tore our family apart about no narcissistic behaviour. My son, a number of years ago, he was really good at school, head school, but end of the year, started an engineering degree, become a special constable. But me and his mum split up while he was a child, and then we got back together later on. But my son had never had no said to him by his mother, his auntie and his grandmother. He's put on this pedestal.
Okay.
So I never had no said to him. So while he was he started driving while he was 16 when he wasn't supposed to be driving because his mum gave in to him. And I said, we're heading down a dark road with our son. And then while he was in the special constable, we found out that he'd been taking police cars out with a friend of his while on duty. They did put themselves on duty and go driving round, and he got caught. And even though he was getting told, you can't do this.
I might have to nudge you to the shorter version of the story, Kevin, respectfully.
I know, James, well, it's been over a few years, but what happened is my son eventually ended up in prison for 4 years.
And did he have any concept of wrongdoing?
No, because...
He thought it was his right to do all of the things that you described. Right.
He would never say no, even after he got initially a driving ban, and then he got done for misconduct in a public office. He was still getting insurance taken out in other people's names. He was getting... I
wonder what he would have needed. Would he have needed to have been born into epic wealth to have gotten away with it? Because I do find that question popping up in my mind throughout this morning's show. How does he actually, if it's so obvious to describe what he is, and of course then you sort of list the self-confessed sex offending, the bankruptcies, the multiple felonies. Your boy ends up in prison, he ends up in the White House. Is it just an accident of birth, or is there something else going on?
I think because Trump himself really admired his mother, didn't he? And his dad was a hard businessman. But with my son, if you wanted like a pair of £300 shoes, this is like 10 years ago, we'd have to go into debt to get them, but we'd have to get them because he tested us so much for them. And this went on all the way through life until eventually, when the judge sent him down, he went, "You are a narcissist." And
he used that word.
He used the word.
He didn't obey the Goldwater rule. I mean, we use it as a figure of speech rather than necessarily as a diagnosis. But that idea that the normal rules don't apply to me, and then that's a very good point. Actually, we used to tell us to check it out. We came on the program to talk to us about it. Alex Andreou's podcast, The Podyssey, which does an extraordinary job of bringing Greek mythology into the modern world, which of course is another illustration of the point I was making about great art and great stories having a relevance long beyond the era in which they were written. But the King Midas episode and the Narcissus and Echo episode bring particular, Narcissus literally of course, bring particular light to bear upon this question of narcissism. David uses another literary reference, suggests that we're looking at Gilead, which is, of course, a reference to The Handmaid's Tale, another American civil war with Canada supporting the rebels. I don't know. I mean, I see things in our newspapers about British politicians saying we have to be ready for war. We need to increase defence spending. War with who? And then the story that I absolutely didn't want to forget about today. I'll be with you imminently, Mark in Brighton. Couple of phone lines free on this question of what might happen next, or what you know about narcissism and what it can teach the rest of us about Donald Trump. 0345 6060973 is the number you need, especially the second question there. Kevin just opening the batting, but that deeper, like lifelong association with a full-on narcissist and what it teaches you about how Trump is behaving. But this story here may well turn out to be one of those acorns from which a mighty oak grows. Russian internet users were searching for information about a terror attack in Germany several days before it occurred. Just think about what that might mean. This is an investigation that suggests Moscow may have had advanced knowledge of the violence. And the terror attack was one of a number that occurred just in time to influence the most recent elections in Germany. There's a former officer in Germany's Foreign Intelligence Service who says that the searches they found evidence of, the internet searches they found evidence of, were not proof of Russian involvement, but that Moscow's spy agencies had a tradition of active measures that stretched back to the Cold War era KGB. With this evidence, I would say we certainly have here at least an initial suspicion in intelligence terms, not in prosecutorial terms, but in intelligence terms, that we need to follow up. We have to realise this kind of crime would, as a violent provocation, absolutely fit with the toolbox of what we call hybrid war these days. So if you think about a terror attack, in this case undertaken by an Afghan refugee, and there were a few others as well in the same piece of the calendar, and then how they get responded to on social media, chiefly on the platform owned by Elon Musk, and the kind of impulses that they create. I mean, they did it, of course, with a terrible attack in this country that had absolutely nothing to do with an asylum seeker, a refugee, or a Muslim, but it didn't stop people like Andrew Tate claiming otherwise, and people like Nigel Farage treating Andrew Tate like a trusted news source. So if it were actually somehow being orchestrated by Russia, it would once again be evidence of absolutely epic efforts to sow instability on this side of the world in order to protect Putin's position on the other side. Which brings us back to Donald Trump. Mark's in Brighton. Mark, what would you like to say?
James, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. I first covered Donald Trump in 1975.
Go on.
He was, at that point, a builder, developer, and he and his father had opened an apartment complex called Trump Village.
Yeah.
He was openly racist in that he never allowed black people to live there. Eventually, he got taken to task in 1975, and he ended up having to sign what's called a consent decree, which was that he had to stop discriminating. 3 years later, he had to sign a second consent decree. That's Donald Trump.
Yeah.
All right. It's as simple as that. This is a guy who, through the years, as many of your callers have pointed out, never, ever, and this comes from his father, never admitted he was wrong about anything. And that's how he's running the country. And put simply, to quote a Columbo episode, all he wants is all there is, period. He hates non-autocratic Europe. He hates Keir Starmer. He hates you. I hate to say it, but it's true. Donald Trump hates anybody that stands in his way or has any progressive bone in their entire body. And he thrives off chaos, which is why nobody can predict what he's going to do next, because he thrives on that kind of chaos. And the people who benefit from that kind of chaos. Does anybody know how J.D. Vance ended up being vice president?
Well, I mean, the word is that it was what Peter Thiel wanted, and that Trump was persuaded by one of his sons that...
That's right, Donnie Jr.
Yeah.
Donnie Jr. lobbied incessantly for J.D. Vance. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the gig.
When you say you covered him in the 70s, in what capacity, Mark?
I worked at a radio station.
Oh, that'll never catch on, will it? Well, then you're well placed, because the 1973 stuff, I think Hillary Clinton brought up during the election, and it didn't land. I'll tell you the other thing it does, if we're going to get psychological, which we have done so far today. It explains his continuing hatred of diversity, equity and inclusion, because that was one of the occasions when he did actually get his knuckles rapped fairly robustly by the authorities for being a racist. For
You know what DEI actually stands for?
Go on.
Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka. It's just.
I'll ask you what I've asked everybody. Then, how does he get away with it? And for you, this is a 50-year canvas that you can paint on now. How does he get away with it? When some of the stuff you're telling me is so obvious, and much of it is on the record.
He gets away with it because for many years he was a New York phenomenon. All right, people in New York knew who he was. People in New York knew who his father bribed so that he could get, for example, the construction of a hotel that was against zoning law, that kind of stuff. And then people on the West Coast started knowing him when he started spreading his wings a little bit. But most people in the middle of America had no clue who Donald Trump was until The Apprentice.
Right.
And that whole "you're fired" thing, which is entertainment.
Sure.
Okay, I never watched it, but it's entertainment.
Yeah.
That convinced Donald Trump that one day he could be president because these people in the middle of the country would follow him once he developed a line that they could agree with and that they could align with. This is a guy who appeals to the religious right in America, who's been divorced 3 times, had I don't know how many affairs. I mean, it boggles the mind how easily people get away with it. But listen, I don't want to take up too much of your time. Before I go, can you do me a big favor?
It depends what it is.
Will you stop? Well, you can't stop. Will you tell people to stop using the word woke until they can define it?
I've done that already. I've written a bloody book about it, Mark. I've done my bit in this field, but
okay.
Yeah, no. I before you go, actually, you need to do one more thing. How does it play out? What happens next?
What happens next is whatever the most chaotic stuff he can dream up in his head is. The tariff thing is just the beginning. He's going to start coming down, and this won't really cause a ripple in the rest of the world, but he's going to start coming down on Americans who disagree with him like a ton of bricks. It hasn't happened yet.
Well, it's kind of happening, isn't it?
Very, very soon. But tell people to stop using... Do you know where the word woke came from?
Of course I do, yes. It was a good thing. People who were alive to or awake to discrimination and unfair... Oh, go on then, correct me.
No. In 1949, a blues singer by the name of Leadbelly, you know who he is?
No, Go on.
Okay. In 1949, Leadbelly did a song called Scottsboro Boys about 9 men who were almost lynched because they were accused of raping 2 white women. Eventually, they all got off, and one of them went into hiding. It's a very long, convoluted story. At the end of that song, Leadbelly does a narration where he says to northern black people who were traveling through the South, which was a dangerous undertaking in 1949, and he said at the end of that narration, stay woke. Be careful. That's what stay woke actually means.
Wow. Alert.
Yeah, be alert. Because if you weren't, and 5 years after he wrote that song and said that, a young kid named Emmett Till was killed by racists attached to a refrigerator and thrown to the bottom of a lake. That's what woke is about.
You're very good, Mark. How did you end up in Brighton?
My wife isn't here, so I can say this. She convinced me once I retired to come over here, and I enjoy it. I'm actually, in retrospect, I'm really glad I'm not in America to experience this. I was in New York like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and people in New York are beat down. They were beat down economically, which is why so many of them turned on Joe Biden.
Right.
But they're being beat down on a daily basis. I saw older people walking the streets who basically were clinging, and I mean clinging, onto a rent-controlled apartment because that was all they had.
And that provides fertile ground for the kind of fantasies that Donald Trump is selling again.
Oh, yeah.
I get it.
And by the way, if you want to see what Donald Trump is really all about, read Mary Trump's book.
That's the second recommendation today. And it still doesn't, no one can go all the way there, can they? Because that's his niece, I think, describing him in terms. You've got all of the things you remind us of, the court cases coming out of his ears, the things he's said out loud, never mind the things he's been convicted of, the bankruptcies, the appalling associations, and yet here he is. There's something else, isn't there? There's something, if we were religious people, Mark, I don't know whether you are or not, there's something almost Faustian about this level of achievement, given the backdrop that you describe and that others have described all morning.
All it means is that if you have money to start with, which he did because his father gave him $3 million, and you're able to say, I never did anything wrong.
It wasn't me.
It wasn't me. To quote, who was that? Shaggy?
Shaggy, yeah. The sage, the great sage exactly. Shaggy. Well, Mark, you deserve the title Great Sage, possibly rather more than Shaggy does. I hope that we'll talk again. I really do. That was fantastic. It really was. Not exactly uplifting, but, every cloud has a silver lining, as Mark says. He's living in Brighton now, not New York.
James O'Brien on LBC.
7:52 is the time, and me too. I hope that Mark gets in touch again, particularly on matters Trumpian, because it's simultaneously baffling and crystal clear. In some ways, it depends on how I do my job, I suppose. You could tell Mark had a history in radio because he kept asking questions, which makes you lean in. Do you know who so-and-so is? Do you know who? It makes you lean in and pay attention. But when it's simultaneously crystal clear and baffling, it's hard to take the line on what you do. I mean, come on, what do you think? What's your opinion? This is territory that we're not used to. And yet, I think today, together, we've made some real progress. And it's not a massive breakthrough to realise that it's pointless trying to analyse what's going on when really everything is about him. Not only in his mind, but latterly, of course, in the whole world. All he wants is all there is. Takes us right back to an earlier caller describing his desire for sort of 1,000-year-old legacies. And it's why I mentioned Ozymandias, that poem about someone with similar ambitions who was brought so low. Ibrahim is in Leicester. Ibrahim, what made you pick up the phone?
Yeah, so I was just calling because I find it interesting the direction Trump is taking things, because it's kind of going down the same direction as his idol. So if you look at previous Republicans, they would always say, Ronald Reagan is my idol. They'd kind of try to follow his playbook. But if you follow Trump, he's kind of going down the whole William McKinley playbook. So William McKinley, friend he wanted to take over Canada as well. He kind of imposed really large tariffs. And he was saying that America was really hard done and downtrodden by kind of free trade with the rest of the world. So there's a lot of similarities in then and now.
Yeah, I mean, he loves tariffs. Can't really tell you why, and he might be able to point to, I suppose, different historical moments that justify what he has done. And it was to protect American workers from foreign competition, but this isn't the 1890s, is it?
No, so that's the thing, though, because it's kind of a misunderstanding of history.
Yes.
So he thinks because in the past, tariffs were a large part of the tax receipts, and America was also developing really rapidly, and he thinks those two things are connected, even though those things were...
So it's golden ageism, isn't it? That's why it's a little bit Brexity. It's whether the golden age existed or not. He's not just like a snake oil salesman selling it to the population. He actually believes it. And if we take Mark's call and sit it alongside yours, he believes that the good old days were when he was allowed to tell black people they weren't welcome in his apartment buildings. Two different types of good old days. One that probably never happened and one that actually did.
Yeah, so it is kind of becoming like a cult in a way, because you say to his followers who feel a certain way, they might be in a state that wasn't not been doing so well. Yeah. They felt deindustrialization, and it's given them a kind of false sense of hope, because right now, if you put tariffs on China, those companies are still going to import things from China, but their grocery bills and things will go up massively. And then the factories which will be built in America will take 5 to 10 years, and it's a lot of capital expenditure which companies won't make because they think these tariffs might be temporary, so they don't even know.
And it doesn't matter, because that is normal analysis of an abnormal situation, but it doesn't work, because the other point is that the people that are close to him are saying polar opposite things. Say, he'll lift them, it's just a negotiating tactic, he won't lift them, it's absolutely certain, the markets don't know what to do. I read somewhere it's like a teenager looking at the text from a boy or a girl that they fancy, trying to read into like the use of an X or something. In the olden days, it'd be emojis now, whether or not they like you. It's pointless, isn't it? It's like palm reading. It's utterly pointless, and yet nobody else knows what to do. And some people are going to get it right. Some people are going to jump the right way and make a ton of money. I'm talking about people who have no private or secret information. But yeah, I mean, you're generous to cite McKinley as his idol, points out Alex. It's obviously Vladimir Putin, but you can have two. You can have two heroes. Mike's in Marlow with probably the last word on this, on the Trump element of our conversation today, but not the last word of the show because there is an hour to go. Mike, what would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
I have a real life dilemma. We have an English company. We've made an English product which will be having manufactured in China.
Right.
So we are just about to launch with a Kickstarter campaign and everything else, which means we've got to set our prices. But how can we set a price when we haven't got a clue what the import tariffs are going to be?
To get it into this country, I think you're going to be all right, aren't you?
Oh, no, to get it into here, but to put it into the States...
Yeah.
That's a different matter, isn't it?
Yes,
so to put it in here, I've got no problem with it. Comes in Tilbury Docks, goes to the warehouse, no problem at all. If it goes into, for example, Los Angeles and then gets distributed from there, what on earth are the tariffs going to be? And this is a genuine thing. I've got to set my prices for this Kickstarter campaign.
So that people know what they're getting in return for their contributions.
You've got it.
God, yeah. Mate, it is. I mean, it's big and little at the same time. Is it? How does it work? Because I thought, it would be a 10% tariff if it was coming from here. It would be a 104% tariff if it was coming from China. But doesn't this bring us back, as so much does during conversations about trade and tariffs, doesn't it bring us back to cheese and wine? The first people to call this programme after Brexit to explain how it was going to change their business, explain that if they opened a warehouse in the EU and used that as a hub from which to send out all their delivery. But that wasn't about avoiding tariffs, that was avoiding paperwork. So they could just send it all out from the same hub rather than having an individual piece of paperwork for each piece of cheese. But do you know whether or not sending it from here after it's been in China would be the same as sending it directly from China to the United States of America?
I would have to assume so, yeah. Because it's going to be
otherwise everyone would do
FOB,
it,
which is free on board in China. It then gets shipped to, the first time it sees the light of day is when it gets off the boat in Los Angeles.
And how big a deal is the American angle to your plans, to your business plans?
Well, monstrous.
Really?
I mean, we're in the board game business like you, so...
I think you're a slightly bigger player than I am, Mike.
Well, this is the thing, but how do I set my prices? Because when you run a Kickstarter campaign...
You need to tell people what they get in return for that, what they get in return for their investment.
Absolutely. So if I say, well, look, it's normally $30, but you can have it for $25, I could shoot myself in the foot if he's going to play... silly so-and-so.
So what are you going to do? It's rules of origin.
Rules
of origin. There you go. I knew that phrase meant something. Yeah, you're screwed. Sorry, Mike. What are you going to do?
I don't know. I was hoping you might be able to tell me.
I have. It's rules of origin. You can't. You're going to have to wait and see what happens on there. So you can't launch your Kickstarter. If the American angle is that big, I don't think you can launch your Kickstarter until this storm has passed, which brings us back to where this conversation started 2 hours ago, which is, can this really go on for 4 more years?
I know, it's bonkers.
There you go. A last word on it. We got from Shaggy to Dizzy Rascal. It's it wasn't me to bonkers. With a little bit of Red Dwarf, King Lear, and what was the other one? And Lead Belly in between. All human life is here.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 12, in the spirit of Columbo, I think I've tracked down our caller from Brighton, and I would be amazed if it is not Mark Riley, described as a New York music and media legend. Listen to this, 45 years as a news talk radio presenter in New York City. I thought I was doing all right, getting through the 20 mark. And he's interviewed a range of high-profile individuals, including Nelson Mandela, President Bill Clinton, and Jesse Jackson. So very, very flattered that Mark found the time to call us today with a CV and a track record like that. But you could tell, couldn't you, that you're in the presence of somebody who was not only a brilliant communicator, but also knew exactly what he was talking about. But yeah, don't use the word woke unless you can tell me what it means. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. Oddly, and somewhat unexpectedly, the conversation I want to have next does have a link to the conversation that we've been having for the last 2 hours. It was an early caller, by which I think I mean the first hour, who talked about dementia in the context of Donald Trump. And it was a reminder of what a broad church dementia is. The images that, like a lot of things we talk about on the programme, or at least like a lot of the things we used to talk about on the programme before politics went bonkers, the subject is one about which you know nothing until you need to know everything. There's so many subjects like that. I think the one I went for first was care homes. Care homes for your parents. You know nothing about it until you need to know everything. And you need to know everything quite quickly, because quite often the decision, once it's taken, needs to be enacted fairly swiftly. There's a story today I couldn't bring myself to talk about. I think I know Sheila talked about it yesterday. She talked about the broader findings of how many injuries and bad things happen in nurseries, childcare nurseries, in the course of a year. But I read into the story of a little 9-month-old baby called Genevieve, who died while in a nursery, and the head of the baby room at that nursery was subsequently jailed for 14 years. And do you know what happened? Is when they accessed the CCTV, which there's no legal requirement to provide apparently in nurseries, but most parents probably want to be able to tap into it to keep an eye on their little treasure. When I can't say this is why I couldn't do it as a subject, it broke me. When they accessed the CCTV in pursuit of answers to the question of how this little baby had died, they found another member of staff neglecting another child, and she then got sent down for 4 years. I don't know why. My kids are way, way, way older now than that, but I can't do it. I can't go today to the difficulties in that field or working out those things. But it is one of those things about which you know nothing until you really need to know everything. And none of us really end up knowing everything, do we? We don't find out everything we need to know. They'd have thought that was a good nursery. They'd be blaming themselves for the rest of their lives, but unnecessarily, well, wrongly. And yet, how do you know until you need to know? Until you know. And that is why the story of Jackie Stewart, the Formula One legend, touched me so deeply today, not least because my mum is very much in this age range, and mum, I'm sure she won't mind me saying, is at great pains to point out as her physical health is declining. She's not as mobile as she used to be by any stretch of the imagination, and it can be very frustrating, but she is at great pains to point out, quite unnecessarily actually, that she's still got all her marbles. I think when you get into your 80s, it becomes a thing, doesn't it? Every time you think you've forgotten something, like you forget someone's name, or you can't, you got something on the tip of your tongue. It's probably happened all your life. You go into cognitive decline from, I think, your mid-20s, but it depends how high up you are to start with. By the time you get into, I'm in my 50s now. I know it's very hard to believe, but I am actually. I can prove it. I've got my birth certificate. You begin to worry that you do it physically, don't you, when you get to middle age? As you begin to realise that sometimes a twinge might be permanent. Have you reached this point yet? Where you kind of think, oh, my knees. And then you think, oh, my days. What if that's forever? When you're young, you just think, oh, I'll run that off. Or, well, not like I ever ran anything off, but you just think, oh, that will pass. But when you get into middle age, you find yourself thinking, that might be permanent. But perhaps I'm now going to have a bad back for the rest of my life. Because you know that people do. Perhaps I'm just going to have trouble with my knees for the rest of my life, because you know that people do. It comes at about the same time that you find this irresistible urge to make noises whenever you undertake any form of physical exertion, by which I mean getting in and out of chairs. So I don't know what the exact age is, and I presume it's different for different people. But when you start going, when you're just in the business of sitting down or standing up, that is around the point in life where you start thinking to yourself, oh dear, that knee pain might actually be the new me. That might be permanent. And that's why I guess that the mental health equivalent, or the cognitive decline equivalent of that, will be every time you forget something, or every time you can't remember something, or you walk into the kitchen, you can't remember why you go there. The older you get, the more you worry that this might be evidence of a bigger problem, right? I'm making sense, aren't I? Just checking. You begin to think, oh Lord. So when I talk to Mum, not every time I talk to her, but she often points out that she's still got her marbles, and she's well into her 80s now. And I don't know whether it is Mum's age or whether it is just the poignancy of how Sir Jackie Stewart has described it, but this one got me right in the feels. His wife was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, which is kind of my point about there being so many different types of diagnosis and so many different experiences and conditions. He revealed the heartbreaking moment when she forgot who he was. He said, just the other day it was time for dinner. She's getting up and I'm sitting close by and she says, "Where's Jackie?" And that's the first time that's happened, and that was only a few weeks ago. I know she doesn't mean it when she suddenly goes round and hits me. She lashes out at him as well. She can hit somebody quite often, and she uses language that she's never ever said in her life, and that broke my heart today. I don't know why. I've read about dementia a million times, and I'm not a particular Formula One fan, and I know who Sir Jackie Stewart is, but he wasn't a hero of mine, particularly in childhood, or someone I was desperate to interview, but just something about the simplicity of these statements and the quiet devotion he displays. There it is. It's the devotion he displays. It's the love that's on show here that's so powerful, isn't it? Just the other day, he said, it was time for dinner. She's getting up and I'm sitting close by and she says, "Where's Jackie?" That's the first time that's happened, and that's only a few weeks ago. And you got to have a heart of stone not to be moved by that. But it made me think about other people. And it made me wonder about the moment where you can't ignore it anymore. And please, God, this never happens to you. But if it has, you'll be able to answer this. Please, God, it never happens to me or mine. But you never know, do you? The point at which you know that this isn't just normal forgetfulness that your wife or your husband or your nan or your mum is displaying, that the things that make you realise this is medical and this is bad. I want to talk about that today because I think it might be quite important. If you are anything like me, you'll be a master or a mistress of denial, so you'll be able to say, "Oh no, that's fine. That's how I'll shake it off," in the words of Taylor Swift. But how do you know? Because he's reached the point where there is no doubt. I mean, she was diagnosed, Lady Stewart was diagnosed in 2014. So, the fact that she can lash out at her husband and hit him and swear and use language that she's never used in her life, that's way beyond the point of what's the word I'm looking for? The point of realisation that this is not going to get better. This isn't going to improve. And I want you to tell me what happened in your life. I want you to tell me about what's the word I want? A moment, but it's a bigger word than moment. The point, it's almost the point of no return, isn't it? It's almost the point of no return. What was it? Because to you it might now seem normal, but to those of us who haven't been down this path or haven't walked down this path with a loved one, this is all new and alien. This is all utterly uncharted territory. So what was it for you? What was the moment? Because that's the first heartbreak, right? When you can no longer persuade yourself that this is going to come out in the wash or that this is just an occupational hazard of getting older and we all get a little bit more forgetful. How did you know that this was not going to go away, that this was not going to get better, and that this was going to change all of your lives? If you hit the numbers now, I know it'll be a difficult one, but I can assure you of my sensitivity at least. I can promise you of that. Just give me a call, all right? The number you need is 0345 6060 973. It's such a headline. My wife is starting to forget me. Of course, it's also because I love my wife so much. Of course it is. That's why I found myself responding to this in such a visceral way. But what is that moment like, that first moment where you realise and everybody else realises, except perhaps the person concerned, that we are going to have to deal with this. We can't wait this one out. We can't sit this one out. We can't get better. Hit the numbers now. The defining moment, Sammy suggests, or Alex says the word you're looking for is singularity. Is it? Here's an example from David. This is just, man. My granddad drove us to school, as he often did, but he drove us to the other school at the bottom end of our road. That was the moment when all the denial disappeared. That's the phrase. When did all the denial disappear? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
17 after 12, and I don't know if this will segue into something helpful. I mean, that's always the intention, but I can never guarantee it. Here is precisely the kind of person listening who is in need of a bit of help. We're here right now, James. My mum's memory is failing quite quickly and her masking skills are slipping. She is in complete denial, as was my dad for a long time. Only today, I think Dad's in denial about Mum. Only today, he was to have a conversation with their doctor about getting her in for a routine checkup, and the doctor would then sneak the dementia question test in too. But Dad's cancelled because he's scared. I really don't know where we go from here, and it's so sad. And a couple of you pointing out at something I've missed because, as I said, I haven't been there. It's not just the this isn't going away or this isn't going to get better, James. A huge part of it is the worry of what's to come, because it's the acceptance of decline. And that describes the denial, the postponement of the moment of realisation or the epiphany or whatever you want to call it, because you want to put it off, don't you? Because you know that that's the beginning of a decline. It's not the end of a process, it's the beginning of a worse process. I think Tom in East Sussex puts it best. The tipping point or the crossing the Rubicon with dementia, it's the definitive ending of one chapter and the start of a definitive decline. And that, I think, explains why it is so tempting, if not necessarily easy, to pretend, to fool yourself. And I guess we're talking about the moment where you can't do that anymore. Danielle's in Chelmsford. Danielle, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
First time, long time, as they say.
Welcome.
Thank you. My mum died of frontotemporal dementia 9 years ago.
Oh.
I know. And but I was just saying to your producer that we probably lost her about 7 years before that.
Yeah.
And now looking back, once she had a diagnosis in 2011, and then she died in 2016. Actually unrelated. She ended up getting cancer, and then eventually died of a stroke. They threw everything at her.
Oh, bless her.
But the first time that I thought there's something, I stopped knowing who she was. You know, I knew her inside out. I'm an only child.
Yeah.
And my parents were separated, so we were very, very close. And she had loved my other two children, just
of course.
She couldn't get enough of them.
Yeah.
And then I got pregnant with my third son, and she said, "Why on earth would you want to do that? Why on earth would you want to have another baby?" And I was like, I don't know who you are.
Oh.
There's been other things that she said,
But that was the deal breaker, as it were. You could get through the other side. I don't know what's wrong with your phone, Danielle, but it's making some very strange noises.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
What are you doing?
I'm sitting at my table.
You're not eating biscuits?
Oh, I wish I was. No, I'm not. Is it any better?
It is a bit.
I don't know whether to wander into the garden.
No, it's not. It wasn't a signal. It sounded like you had a squirrel in your mouthpiece or something like that. It's not a figure of speech.
No.
It literally did sound like you had a squirrel in your mouthpiece.
No, I definitely do not have.
But that was
my cat might, but,
so at odds with who your mum was that you knew that wasn't just
and
moment
actually
of weirdness.
With frontotemporal. It is different from Alzheimer's, because I think with Alzheimer's you keep more of who you are for longer. With frontotemporal, it's very much personality driven. And so, like I think you were saying, Jackie Stewart, you said about, she was saying things that would never be said. She'd never say these words.
Got it.
And this is like the same thing with her. So everything that she was, so she was very glamorous. She became frumpy.
Yeah.
She was very, very generous. She became very mean.
Oh, no.
She was conspiracy theory. Everybody was lining up, so somebody was stealing from her. None of it was happening.
Oh dear, that's tough for you as well. But I don't suppose there's much time or much space at the time for you to deal with your feelings, because you're so wrapped up in dealing with hers. Did you have to have a conversation? Did you have to say to her at some point, while she was still capable of fully understanding things, that this isn't right, Mum, we're going to have to do something with you, or not?
No, well, she wouldn't accept it, and she's still up to no, and she just used to refer to it. So I've got a memory problem or a brain problem or something. She'd never accept it,
And then she got so ill that it didn't matter. In a way,
we had to sort of have her living with us when she got cancer, because there were so many rules and regulations. You must take this an hour before you eat, or you have to do this and that. And she couldn't cope with any of that. So we had her there, but then she would say, "You're keeping me prisoner.
Oh, Lord.
I think you're a horrible person." And she said, "I hope your children treat you the way that you're treating me when you get old." And I said, "Yeah, Mum, I hope they do, because I'm trying to help you."
I can't imagine how hard that was for you, actually. I know we're talking about her, but the more you tell me about it, the more I find myself feeling for you. Danielle, it must have been torture for you.
Yeah, I mean, when she eventually did die, people were saying, "How could you possibly do the eulogy at her funeral?" And I was like, "Well,
after how she treated you towards the end."
Yeah, and I still unfortunately can't get rid of that last sort of few years. I need to try and remember what she was like before that all happened.
You do.
Because she was like a totally different person. But
I didn't know much about that side of things, and I'm grateful to you for telling me on one level, but on another, I think I preferred it when I didn't, because what you've just described is inconceivably sad. Inconceivably sad, and we're all thinking about our mums now, aren't we, whether they're with us or not. Thank you, Danielle. Paul is in Hereford. Paul, what would you like to say?
Hi. My wife was my wife was diagnosed at the age of 56 with it, about the same sort of time as Jackie Stewart's wife.
That's brutal.
It was. We noticed things, or I noticed things. She would constantly ask if I wanted a cup of tea, and literally seconds later she would ask the same question over and over again. And we sort of picked up that there was something going on.
Yeah.
And we had an early diagnosis, which I sort of rejected at the time. And then,
what do you mean? Sorry to pry, but what do you mean you rejected it? You just weren't capable of accepting.
I didn't want to believe it.
So because she's only 56, it can't be dementia.
Yeah,
right.
It can't be dementia. No. So went to various different places, scoured the world for people that could find a cure for it. Yeah. And we found a lot of help with nutrition. We found a nutritionist who was very good, that could help with the proteins on the brain, because that's what it's all about. Well, we had a cutout. I mean, there was lots of things associated with the cause of it, but they're not proven.
No.
And it just got progressively worse and worse and worse. And it sort of came to a head where I couldn't cope anymore. The stress that was being put on myself, as much as I tried with the help of the family,
of course,
it was really hard. And the one day she just decided to get out of the car in live traffic whilst we were travelling along.
What did she think she was doing? Do you know?
She hadn't got a clue. By that time, was very non-communicative.
Okay.
And in a matter of 2 years, she's gone from the person, because she was very well educated. Yeah. She had a really good job at the NHS, and it's one of the things they say, that if you've got somebody who's very intelligent, they can mask the symptoms an awful lot longer.
Oh wow! Okay,
something's wrong. So we.
What did you do then after that? Because that moment in the car is a moment. That's a point. These figures of speech feel a bit inadequate, Paul. So I apologise, but that was a moment of no return. There's no talking yourself out of that, is there? There's no denial of the gravity of the situation after something like that's happened, because it could happen again, and worse.
Well, it could, yeah. And what I learned from that was the compassion of strangers was absolutely amazing, because she didn't want to know me. She was fighting me, but other people were stopping, maybe because they think something was going on between me and her, but other people just took care of her and sort of talked her down and things like that. And then it happened sort of 2 days later. She decided to go and walk in traffic, at which point we had to call an ambulance. And that was when she got, effectively, she was sectioned and obviously put under the care of the state.
Yeah.
And from that point on, the decline has been massive to a point where now she's had 3 strokes in 2 months. She can't walk, can't talk, can't feed herself, can't dress herself. There is absolutely nothing of a person left there, and it's what is frustrating. But from my point of view, and from a lot of other people whose families have got dementia is, this is a different subject, the euthanasia bill, because she was a great believer in that if she ever got ill because of being a nurse, that's what she wanted. But because she hasn't got the cognitive ability to express what she wants or to do it herself, it's totally excluded from any of the voluntary euthanasia programs anywhere in the world, which is extremely cruel because there's no way back at all.
And because she told you that she wouldn't want to live like this.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
right. I mean, it isn't a different subject. If the assisted dying bill in its current form ever gets passed in Parliament, it's not going to be any help to you or your wife, any comfort at all.
No,
any relief, I suppose, is the word that I want. How are you doing, Paul?
Because things over the past 2 to 3 months have really, really come to a head. I've sort of. People have been telling me for years to move on with my life. I need to do different things. And it's when somebody talks to you about a family member, if you say, my mum or my dad had it, it's a very, very different situation to when your wife gets it. Because if your parents had it, my father did have vascular dementia, at the end of the day, you can walk away from that situation and go home to your wife and talk about it. But when your wife's got it, you can't talk to anybody apart from your children who are living with the situation as well.
Yes.
And
you have an impulse to protect them because you're their dad.
Yeah.
So you're lonely. It's a lonely thing that you're describing.
It was. It is still lonely, but I've sort of taken steps to try and alleviate that by joining walking clubs and making different friends and things like that.
Yes, you have to.
Which, I mean, we had long conversations before she became really ill about all these types of things.
So she knew she was on a downward path.
Yeah, absolutely. She was fully aware
and it is.
of that.
I hope it doesn't sound glib, but that line about knowing nothing about. I know your dad had been through it, but no, for many people listening, myself included, mate, knowing nothing until you need to know everything is a real distillation of the situation.
It's very, very true. It's very true because there's nothing out there to help you with it. Nothing at all.
Partly because everybody's experience will be different.
Yeah, I mean, the lady you spoke to previously, she was talking about her mother who'd got frontal temporal, and they were giving her a medication. Yeah. Well, there is no pure medication for frontal temporal. They give you a medication which works for Alzheimer's, which slows the symptoms up, but it really doesn't do any good at all. It's a waste of medication.
I don't know that Danielle's mum, she had so much going on. I think the medication they were talking about was more for her cancer than for the dementia, but I don't know. I mean, it's your point still stands. Paul, thank you, and enjoy. I know it's such a weird verb to use, but the walking clubs and the stuff that you're doing now in order to move on in a way while never moving on completely. It's an incredible conundrum that you describe, and you describe it very powerfully. Thank you. It's coming up to 12:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's amazing. These subjects just, I don't know what it is about something that is universal but not universal at the same time. So everyone will be responding in the way that I'm responding to these stories, and you will have responded, unless of course to go back to the first 2 hours of the programme, unless you're some sort of psychopath, sociopath or narcissist. And that headline, Sir Jackie Stewart, my wife is starting to forget me. But the people listening to the programme will be divided into 2 groups. And there'll be people who get it and people who don't. And the people who get it get almost all of it. It's crazy, right? People like Paul and Danielle and everybody texting me, only some of which I can read out or even read quietly. You get all of it or none of it. There's no kind of middle ground. Normally you've got a graph and you can plot, I'm here. I kind of half get it, or that's, I guess, why we came up with that phrase all those years ago about knowing nothing about a subject until you need to know everything. It's 12:30. Tim Humphrey has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:34 is the time. A lot of love for you, Paul, coming in. A lot of people urging you to get stuck in, if you like, to some of the things that you're doing to take yourself out of yourself. This is a good example. I understand where Paul is completely. It's heartbreaking to lose someone in such a long, drawn-out manner. Much love to him. And an awful lot of people are going to find themselves in... I've got to stop. Sometimes I stumble across things, and then I get so fascinated by it. I repeat myself again and again and again. All right, it's one of those subjects about which you either know nothing or everything. That's it. And I'll try not to labour the point. I don't know why I find that so hypnotic almost. I can't take my eyes off it, but we need to. There's more stories, more people to talk to. John is in Broxbourne. John, what would you like to say?
Well, firstly, James, thank you for bringing this subject up, because I don't think people realise how many people this affects when you consider there's about 1 million people that are known to have any form of dementia.
Gosh.
Add all their family, add all their friends. That's 10 million people it probably affects in this country.
And the rest. You're absolutely right.
And the rest, probably more. And my wife was diagnosed at the age of 50 with Alzheimer's. Brilliant mind, had a degree in microbiology, was a professional artist. Helped bring up my daughter who has Down syndrome, my son who suffers from depression. And then 13 years on, I'm looking at her now, she's laying in bed, she's a living corpse.
Oh, God.
All she can do is eat and drink and go to the toilet. But all I would say is, another thing is, people keep saying, make sure you look after yourself.
Yes.
And it's far too easy to say.
I know it is. But it doesn't mean it's not true.
Well, she's got no. Well, you do have to. And I'll give you an example in a minute. But she had epilepsy as well. So I get up in the night. I do have CCTV. She had a fit at 6 o'clock yesterday morning. That could well end up doing for her eventually. But my son, who has depression, and his partner, who's just completed a course in counselling, said, Dad, get therapy.
Yeah.
And you were the reason why I actually had my first session yesterday.
Oh, gosh.
Because you often refer to it.
I do.
I listen to it all the time.
Thank you.
And I was saying to your researcher, I had my first session yesterday. I think I've struck lucky. I woke up this morning with a buzz.
God.
She gave me a few home truths. She also praised me to the hilt. She sent me a message at 8 o'clock last night saying what a great job I'm doing. There's love in both your hearts. And it really moved me. So, thank you.
You needed to hear that from someone outside.
You do. That's how therapy works, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
I mean, it's all very well going down the pub and talking to my mates down there. And
that can help as well.
But they don't.
That can help as well, but sometimes you need
our
to...
second family is our pub now.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And that I mean, the thing is, and I don't think you need me to tell you this. I don't know, actually, but you deserve it.
Well, that's what this lady was saying yesterday.
Is it?
Yeah. I'm not sure my liver or my doctor agrees, but...
I didn't mean the pub, you wombat. I meant you deserve the care, the self-care. So another one of those breakthrough moments is when someone explains that when you're spending your life looking after someone else, as you are, you almost need permission to look after yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was fascinated listening to Paul a couple of calls ago.
Yes.
I've been through a very similar thing. I'd learnt very early on, because I've been to a lot of Alzheimer's groups.
Yeah.
I locked the door in the car. Now, technically, that's entrapment.
Oh, wow.
But it stopped her trying to get out a few times.
Gosh.
But we'd be in a car park, and she would go to another car.
Yeah.
And then another time, she went up to a guy and just told him she loved him.
Oh, my days.
I think he was quite chuffed.
Nicest thing anyone had said to him all day.
I've had this hell for 13 years.
Oh, John.
But we knew straight away because her dad had cardiovascular dementia.
So you recognised that, and you both recognised it. So you had a conversation about what was happening.
Well, I used to say to her when in the early days when she'd forget things, I say you're turning into your dad.
Yeah.
And she would get that. Was in hindsight, I shouldn't have said that.
Oh wow.
But I could never get her to say the word Alzheimer's or dementia. So there's the denial part of it. And it was only when she was meant to pick up my daughter from a dance class once, and she just got completely lost. We realised, hang on, this is wrong.
We're going to have to get some help.
All I would say another person was talking about how their partner became violent. I hear a lot about that.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Linda was the nicest person I've ever known.
Oh, John.
And so, and that's almost developed into the dementia. She's never been nasty.
Okay.
But I do know of other people where that's... but all I would say to people who are just beginning this adventure, and it is an adventure, because you learn so much. You get to meet lots of other people. I'm now heavily involved with a music therapy group, Music 24, and they've saved our lives. And had it not been for Linda's illness, I wouldn't have met these people. So embrace what it brings, but importantly, when they start getting violent or swear or do silly things, don't have a go at them, because it's not them doing it.
Oh, that's nice.
It's that little thing in the brain that's doing it.
It's the illness.
It's not them.
It's the illness talking.
It's the illness. It's this insipid blooming disease.
I think that might help Danielle, who was saying she still finds it hard to get past what her mum did to her, but it wasn't her mum that did those things. It was the illness, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Ah, you're a good man, John.
Thank you.
You take care and stick with the therapy, yeah? I think you're going to, aren't you?
Honestly, thank you again, John.
Well, come on. But you're welcome. 12:40 is the time. Gosh. Caitlin's in Liverpool. Caitlin, what would you like to say? Caitlin, sorry.
Hi, yeah, Caitlin will do. Yeah, so following on from what your last caller was saying about violence, my dad he's still alive. He's got dementia. I think one of the kind of the biggest moment for me was that it was forgetfulness, because he's always been forgetfulness. He called me about 5 names before he got round to Caitlin, including the dogs.
Right.
So he became a lot really manipulative and quite aggressive.
Oh.
So when my dad was very social and very caring person. He loved having people around, and he loved cooking big meals for people. And they did this one night to family, friends, and we were there. And then after dinner, everyone was sat round, and he just kind of went, "Who are these people, and what are they doing in my house?"
Oh, no.
Started effing and jeffing at them, and they had to leave. And then it progressed from there, where he would be sort of angry at my mum for things he couldn't control.
Yeah.
They lived alone at the time, and then I suddenly realised that I needed to kind of step in, and I said to my mum, "There's a spare key to my house. You have my permission if I'm in the house or not in the house. So if Dad hits you or lashes out or anything, get a taxi round and come to a safe space." And it was like that point that we realised that there is something
when
really
you're giving your
on.
mum advice on how to escape from your dad, you sort of realise this is bigger than us now.
Yeah. And he never, ever, he would be angry and aggressive at her, but he never hit her, he never lashed out. But
sure.
I think she took the brunt of all that kind of, because she was someone so familiar.
So there's 2 moments. There's the one when he didn't recognise the house guest, and then there's the one where you recognised the gravity of the situation because you were talking to your mum as if she was in some sort of crime drama almost, or in the middle of a... Well, she was in the middle of a nightmare of sorts. Are they still with her?
Yeah, so my mum, my dad is now in a home, and to be honest, he's a lot happier and a lot more mellow than he was when he was living with my mum. And she, I mean, this sounds really awful, but she's got her life back.
It doesn't sound awful. Well, I mean, I know why you said that, but I think it was Paul who was talking about needing to have a life beyond caring. Otherwise, and John really brought that home, didn't it? The suffering, the mental anguish that you have if you don't acknowledge that you have. We can all keep more than one plate spinning at the same time. It doesn't mean she stopped loving your dad.
But and she still goes to see almost every day. She'll go and see him. The love and account is still there, but my dad, he's not the same. He's a shell of the person he was.
That's the maddest thing, isn't it? It's I mean, I thought that what John said about reminding yourself, and it doesn't matter how, people can tell you things a million times. Doesn't mean it will cut through the pain, but it isn't Dad talking. It isn't his wife talking. It isn't. It's the illness.
Yeah. If a diabetic had a crash, it's not their fault. It's the illness. But it's so hard when it's personality, and it goes back to that thing about mental health not really being understood.
It's invisible. No one would tell someone with a broken leg to hurry up, would they? Well, I mean, someone might.
And it's what I'd also like to say. It's just I mean, again, my confession. I really hate going to see my dad, because the person that I grew up with, the person who was physically strong, mentally strong, intellectual, was a big carer, is now just a shell.
Yeah.
And I don't want my memories to be tainted by that.
I understand that.
And I feel immense guilt for that at the same time.
I understand that as well. Are you Catholic?
Yes.
There it is.
yeah. You can spot us a mile off, can't you?
They get us early, Caitlin. Yeah. They get us early, and they never let us go, do they? Regardless of what else might be going. But you shouldn't. You shouldn't be feeling guilty, because your dad would want you to remember him like he was, not like he is now. So in many ways, you're doing what he would want you to do when you have those feelings and those thoughts.
Yeah.
I think. Anyway, good luck with it. And I'm glad your mum is in a better place, as it were, mentally and socially. It is 12:45. It is a phone-in, motivated, inspired by the simplest headline you could ever see. My wife is starting to forget me. And millions, as John pointed out, got 1 million diagnoses. That's 1 million people who are already there. How many listening to this are thinking, oh boy, I think they're talking about us, Mum. I think they're talking about, we're not there yet, but I think this is the path we're on. And the point I missed at the top of the hour was the point that when you get to the point we're talking about, that's when everything gets worse, not better. I mean, there is some comfort in knowledge. This is what is happening. It's not a mystery anymore. But it's the beginning of a decline. It's not like you hit the button, oh my Lord, it's a dementia diagnosis. Hit the button, everything freezes. Carry on exactly where you are when you've hit the button. But that's why it's different, right? 12:46 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
48 is the time. I mean, the calls are incredible this hour, but some of the messages coming in via text as well. And on my Blue Sky, this from Alan. My angel, he writes, suffers from secondary progressive MS and nobody prepared us for the dementia. The sheer grinding exhaustion of caregiving is only made bearable by love. But when the person you love fades, then vanishes. If the person you love has become unrecognisable, even monstrous, then the act of caring becomes something perverse, an obligation driven not by love, but by the ghost of it. Sisyphus had a rock. I have a ghost. Alan, that's beautifully expressed, but goodness me, it's heartbreaking. And this is a rather different mood in this message. I'll read it without mentioning any names. You'll see why. You know what, James? Every day truly is a school day on LBC. I'm writing from Gaborone, the capital of Botswana. And believe it or not, I can't go a day without tuning in. I've been a loyal listener since the days of that memorable Frank Lampard call that led to the Kay Burley interview. Look it up if you don't know. Today's topic struck a deeply personal chord. Just last month, my mother was diagnosed with dementia. Caring for her has been an incredibly painful and challenging journey. She's convinced that nothing is wrong. She's perfectly fine in her mind, while the reality is far from it. She forgets things constantly, lashes out at us and becomes angry when we try to help or care for her. She refuses to take her medication, and we're unsure whether she'll even attend her upcoming 30-day review with the doctor. It's heartbreaking for me and my siblings navigating this decline while trying to preserve her dignity and well-being. So thank you for giving space to this conversation. It means more than I can say. LBC has become a university for me, not just on dementia, but on everything, politics, economics, current affairs. It's an education that I treasure daily. Oh, and my name's Obakeng. You might struggle with the pronunciation, so Ob is just perfect. I think Obakeng, I think I got there, didn't I? Wasn't that all right? And Olive puts it beautifully as well. I have so much to say on the subject of caring for a loved one. With dementia, I did it for 14 years, but I wouldn't be able even to write it without falling apart. Your callers are so brave in telling their stories. Much love to them all. Archana is in Walthamstow. Archana, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Thank you for covering this subject. So my mum, in different to a lot of people, my mum's seemed to come on really, really suddenly in September 23. And I literally, my sister lives at home, is the carer now. And she just told me mum's woken up and she's really confused.
Right.
And what's really interesting is the symptoms and how they present seem to be so different in so many cases.
Yes.
There's just not one, typical, state of affairs for one person.
No, there's definitely not. I think that's become clear even in this hour, hasn't it?
Yeah, and James, the worst part is you're reliving grief of dead loved ones, because my mum is constantly asking where my dad is, and my dad passed away in 2012. So she's asked this so many times, where is he? Oh, where is he? He's not here.
So what do you do, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, we were advised by a really amazing organisation, Alzheimer's Society. They have nurses.
Before you go on, I should remind people they can make a donation to the Alzheimer's Society if they've been touched by what they've heard today. It seems important, but sorry, I interrupted you.
No, they have a really amazing service, Admiral nurses, who you can call up for support and who are absolutely brilliant when you're feeling low.
Yeah.
So we were told to go along with things that my mum says, so we should not disagree with her, because they relive the trauma constantly.
So what did you say? Did you say Dad's gone to the shops or something like that?
My dad is basically, lucky sod, has been on the longest golf trip imaginable. He's having a great time. He loved his golf. But I think it's that thing where you are having to relive it yourself.
Yes.
To keep
of
them,
course you are, because you're having to.
Them.
Yeah, of course you are. That's grim, isn't it? That's tough.
And I think that is with a lot of relatives, because the thing is, with the type of dementia my mum had, her thoughts, her timelines have shifted totally.
Yeah.
So while she can do personal care, and she's pretty in that way, in the dementia spectrum, she's fairly independent to a certain extent.
As long as someone's there.
But the saddest thing is she's really vulnerable now.
How do you mean?
She gets so sad when she's left, like when I go and visit her or my sister goes to work.
Yeah.
She has to know exactly what time somebody's coming back, and she was so independent.
Is that because she's frightened? Oh, I think the phone's gone. But you got that across. You got that vulnerability across. That's just me, my nosy way, wondering if we'd be able to work out where that came from. And I think what Archana reminded us of is everybody listening to this with a similar experience is going to have they'll be similar in some ways, but completely different in others. 12:54 is the time. I didn't know that bit about indulging the delusion, as it were. And, of course, didn't I read about care homes in somewhere like the Netherlands or Scandinavia, where they actually recreate the olden days, as it were, so that people with forms of dementia are living in an environment that is like the one they would have lived in 30, 40, 50 years previously. I'm sure I didn't imagine that, but it would fit, wouldn't it, with what Archana told us. Cliff is in Spalding. Cliff, what would you like to say?
Yeah, it's strange, really, having to talk about this. Never done it before. And it's just a case of, with my wife, she was diagnosed with the frontal lobe Alzheimer's back in 2020.
Right.
And it was explained to me, it's like putting on a pair of gloves, where instead of putting it on your hands, you put it on your feet. So when I'm with Chris at the moment, my wife, everything she does, I try and think the opposite. So, she's going through a lot of torment at the moment, and myself. People come round. People have stopped coming round. We don't see anybody.
Okay.
You just it's a horrible, horrible disease.
Are you getting any help, Cliff?
Yeah, I self-finance with some carers. Only this morning I spoke with they call them the memory team now at our local hospital.
Yeah.
And he promised to phone me back last Friday, which he never did. I phoned him again yesterday and left a message, and then I phoned him again this morning just before the carers coming to allow me to have a couple of hours. But unfortunately, James, I don't feel the help's out there.
No.
I think some of it goes from area to area, county to county.
Most things do, don't they, these days?
Yeah. It just seems that the chap that's Chris is under, whose care he's under, his partner, I suppose, I don't know if you call it partner, a work colleague, has just retired, and they're not replaced him. So his workload has now just doubled. And
he's already overwhelmed by the sounds of it. Can I ask what you meant when you said that you haven't talked about it before?
Well, everybody, I was speaking to Dementia UK and Alzheimer's and Emirati nurses, but they just a chat group. They just seem to be they're there to listen, a little bit like Samaritans, and they do try and guide, but it's like, I don't know. It's not the answers I'm looking for, I don't think.
What sort of answers are you looking for, do you think?
People that can really help. I've got a list of phone numbers. I don't know if other people like it. I've got a list of phone numbers as long as my arm. You're told to ring this and ring that, and I had the carers first interview with the local council.
Right.
Halfway through the interview, she's told me that I wasn't entitled to anything.
Eligible, yeah.
Yeah, it's just that because I'm looking for help for Chris.
Yes.
And everybody seems to be. It's my concern. You know, I'm their concern. You know, we're worried about you, how you're dealing with it. But, you know, I keep trying to explain to him, if you could only help Chris,
I'd be less
all my anxieties...
Maybe not all of it, but I know exactly what you mean. I understand where they're coming from. I keep your details in case anyone listening gets in touch with me, because they've read between the lines of what you're saying, or they can meet some of the challenges you're facing, and I'll happily pass them on. But I'm sorry for what you're going through. I think it's important to recognise why they're up, making sure you're okay, Cliff, if you don't mind me saying that, because it cuts both ways. You do a better job. You do a better job with Chris if you're also looking after yourself, you see.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I'm quite strong-willed myself.
I know you are.
People
I know you are. But they're asking for a reason, and you do a better job of caring for her if you're caring for you as well. I promise.
Yeah.
Don't me, okay. Cliff.
Yeah, I'm sorry, mate. No, it's just I've heard it so many times.
I know you have.
It's so much platitude. It's just like...
But sometimes it isn't.
Well, even the care worker, you know, or social worker, you know, he promised to call round every Thursday at the same time. And then 2 weeks later, he's phoning up saying, well, there's no need for me to come round, you know.
Because you're doing such a good job.
Well, I get told that, but I tell you, I'm hanging in there.
I know. Well, you carry on hanging in there. Don't be shut off to the prospect of getting some help for yourself. But as you've clearly made clear, the help for Chris is your top priority. And if anyone's got any ideas about what you could be doing differently, then I'll pass them on to you. I promise. You take care. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to say to you, Cliff. I'm not going to say take care of Cliff. I'm going to say take care of Chris, Cliff. All right.
Okay, thanks, James.
You take care.
Yeah, thanks for the words.
I'm sorry, it's all they are. I hope they're not platitudes. I hope they don't reach you as platitudes. It's 1:00. That's it for today. Gosh, what a show. If you missed any of it, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, the best bits of my show in 60 minutes every day. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Sawbrick will be with you at 4 on LBC. Sheila Fogarty, of course, is with you now.
James O'Brien on LBC.